Before the world knew the fluttering black flag and the cannon's roar across the Caribbean, before tall tales turned pirates into swashbuckling legends of silver screens and storybooks, the seas were already haunted by figures who defied kings, merchants, and empires alike. Tonight, we drift far back in time, so far that the oceans themselves seemed younger, to explore the true beginnings of piracy. Long before the Caribbean was mapped by European explorers, before Spanish galleons ever carried gold from the New World, humans were already venturing out onto the waters and taking from each other what they could not earn or would not wait. For our story begins quietly, almost invisibly, on the wind-swept coasts of the ancient world. Imagine, if you will, the eastern shores of the Mediterranean, where the cradle of civilization gave rise to bustling port cities, fragile trade routes, and daring seafarers. As early as 1350 BCE, records from the mighty Egyptian Empire, written in cautious hieroglyphs, warned of elusive enemies known only as the Sea Peoples. These weren't yet pirates in the romantic sense, but they brought chaos by sea, raiding coastal settlements and disrupting trade in ways that echoed the piracy of later centuries. The Sea Peoples came not with flags or flair, but with hunger and warlike intent. Their names are lost to history, but their presence is etched in ancient stone. Pharaoh Ramses III spoke of them as a wave crashing across the Mediterranean, like a storm with no face. In the stillness of the night, when all was quiet and peaceful, their boats would arrive without warning. No ports were truly safe, and so began a tradition of maritime predation. By 700 BCE, the Greek world, rich in merchant activity and vulnerable islands, faced a new and more familiar kind of seaborne threat. Greek poets like Homer even spoke of piracy casually, sometimes even respectfully. The ancient Greeks saw piracy not as an evil profession, but simply as another way to survive. In the Odyssey, Odysseus is asked directly whether he is a pirate, and the question is posed without judgment. At that time, piracy was just a fact of life on the sea, not a crime, and certainly not a villainy painted in black and red. Piracy, in this age, wasn't yet about rebellion or freedom. It was about scarcity, about taking what the sea gave you and what others could not protect. And so, from the Levantine coastlines to the Ionian Sea, ships would slip out at dusk, not to explore or trade, but to hunt. Even the mighty Roman Republic, later empire, would be plagued by pirates. But that's for a future episode. For now, picture the quiet coasts, the soft lapping of oars in the water, and the first whispers of lawlessness upon the waves. This was not yet the age of gunpowder and plundered doubloons, but the seed of piracy had been planted. As the stars hung still over the ancient sea, the first pirates looked up, not with dreams of glory, but with eyes sharp from hunger, ready to take what tomorrow might never offer. And so, piracy began, not with a roar, but with a whisper on the tide. If you're still with me, gently adrift in thought and imagination, let's continue drifting past the misty beginnings of piracy's earliest whispers, and deeper into the ancient world, where piracy was no longer just a survival strategy, but a system, a business, and even, in some corners of the world, a form of rule. By the 3rd century BCE, the Mediterranean had become a bustling crossroads. Merchant vessels, heavy with olive oil, grain, wine, and textiles, crisscrossed between Egypt, Greece, Phoenicia, and Carthage. It was an age of commerce, but also an age of great vulnerability, because where wealth moved, danger followed, and pirates, ever adaptable, evolved to match. Some of the most sophisticated early pirates, came not from the fringes of society but from well-organized communities who relied on piracy as a primary economic activity. The Cilicians, who occupied a rugged, rocky stretch of southern Anatolia, modern-day Turkey, are often remembered as among the first professional pirate societies. Their coastline was jagged and maze-like, filled with coves and inlets perfect for hiding swift vessels. It was said that the geography of Cilicia itself bred piracy. Its shores were impossible to patrol, and its people, isolated from rich inland trade, turned to the sea to sustain themselves. Cilician pirates operated in broad daylight. They were bold, sometimes capturing whole towns, sometimes offering their services as mercenaries or transporting slaves. Far from being outcasts, they became embedded in the regional economy. In the 2nd century BCE, piracy and slavery went hand in hand. Whole villages might be emptied by a raid, their residents shackled and sold in bustling slave markets across Delos and Ephesus. This was not chaos. This was organized, calculated, and profitable. As piracy intensified, entire networks formed. Pirate leaders, or warlords, emerged, men like Diodotus Tryphon, who used pirate fleets to back his claim to the Seleucid throne. These were not cartoonish rogues, they were political actors, manipulating violence on the sea to build power on land. And all the while, Rome watched. In the early centuries of its rise, the Roman Republic saw piracy as a nuisance, but not an existential threat. After all, Roman legions marched on land, and their power lay in the sword, not the sail. But as Rome expanded, piracy became impossible to ignore. The Mediterranean, once a wide and open arena of trade and colonization, began to feel tighter, more controlled. Rome began calling it Mare Nostrum, our sea, and yet it was not theirs. Not yet. By the 1st century BCE, piracy had reached a kind of golden age, not the kind of gold-laced fantasy we associate with treasure maps, but golden in the sense of scope and audacity. The Cilician pirates became infamous for their coordination and reach. They plundered as far west as Italy, even daring to raid Ostia, the very port of Rome itself. Imagine, for a moment, what it meant to be a Roman merchant at that time. You've loaded your ship with amphorae of olive oil or jars of salted fish, bound for Alexandria or Rhodes. The sun warms the deck, the sea is calm. Then, a faint speck on the horizon, a low, fast-sailing vessel. No flags, no warning. And then the chase. You cannot outrun them. They are lighter, leaner, more experienced. Before the sun dips below the horizon, you are either dead, your cargo stolen, or enslaved. The Roman historian Plutarch wrote that the pirates of Cilicia had over 1,000 ships. 1,000. They took prisoners, not just for money, but sometimes for ransom. Some were treated well, others were sold. They even mocked Roman aristocracy, capturing senators and demanding clever sums not too high, so the ransom would be paid quickly, and not so low that Rome would be insulted. One such senator was a young man named Gaius Julius Caesar. Around 75 BCE, while traveling across the Aegean, Caesar was kidnapped by Cilician pirates. They demanded 20 talents of silver for his release, a significant sum. But Caesar laughed. 20. Do you know who I am? I should be worth at least 50. And so, the pirates raised the price. He was kept on their ship for over a month. He wrote poetry. He joked. He joined their meals. But all the while, he warned them. When he was freed, he would return and he would crucify them all. They laughed, of course. What captive doesn't make such threats? But Caesar was not bluffing. Once the ransom was paid and he was released, Caesar raised a fleet, hunted them down, and true to his word he crucified them. Perhaps mercifully, he had their throats cut first. That incident, quiet, small, and almost humorous, marks a turning point. Rome was done tolerating pirates. They appointed a man named Pompey Magnus, Pompey the Great, with unprecedented power to eliminate piracy from the Mediterranean. Pompey did in 3 months what centuries of merchant pleas could not. He broke the pirate network. He offered clemency to those who surrendered, relocated them to inland towns, and crushed those who resisted. With the Cilician strongholds emptied and the coasts cleared, the Mediterranean finally became what Rome had long claimed, Mare Nostrum, our sea. But piracy, as you'll come to see across these episodes, never truly dies. It simply migrates, adapts, waits. As the empire rose, piracy was pushed to the fringes, only to re-emerge later in stranger, deadlier forms. But the lesson of antiquity was clear. Piracy is not born in madness or mischief, but in opportunity and imbalance. It thrives not on lawlessness, but on the spaces in between the laws. And so we float onward, past the defeated Cilicians, past the ambitions of Pompey, toward the edges of empire where new pirates wait, quietly, in the dark. So now, we've arrived at the end of our journey through the very beginnings of piracy, and the sea is quiet again. We've traveled across time, far beyond the movies and storybooks, beyond the cliches of gold coins and treasure maps, to a place more ancient, more human, and more real. A world where piracy didn't yet wear a skull and crossbones, where there were no jewels at dawn, and no buried chests in sandy coves, where pirates had no flag to fly, and no anthem to sing, just the sound of waves, just the creaking of timber underfoot, just survival, and the sea. Try, for a moment, to picture it again, not as a scene from a film, but as something lived. The year is 500 BCE, perhaps, or 75. You're on the deck of a vessel, the kind made from cypress and cedar, held together with bronze nails and layers of pitch. The sails are simple. The oars are worn from use. You're not a pirate yet. Maybe you're a trader, or a sailor, hired to move cargo along the shore. Maybe you fish, or maybe you've lost your land to taxes, or war, and the only direction left to go is out into the water. The sea, for you, is both escape and opportunity. There are no laws out here, no borders, just tides and currents and the stars above to guide you. Now imagine night falling. Slowly, the horizon turns from gold to ash. The last slivers of sun melt into the foam. Around you, the water darkens, becomes like ink. It breathes in and out with a rhythm as ancient as time itself. Above, the sky opens wide, endless, clean. Stars come out, one by one. No city lights, no noise, just the low murmur of the wind in the rigging and the hush of your own thoughts. This is how those earliest seafarers lived, not in the chaos of combat or conquest, but in silence and patience. Nights passed slowly, meals were simple, and every sound on the horizon might mean danger or nothing at all. A distant splash, a gull's cry, the slap of waves against wood, the hush of an oar slipping into water. You're not a villain, you're not a hero, you're simply surviving. And some nights, when there's no food to trade, and nothing in your net but seaweed, and you see a merchant vessel on the horizon unescorted, heavy with goods, you wonder, what would happen if you just took it? No flag, no warning, just speed, surprise, and the sea on your side. This is how piracy began, not with wickedness, not with glory, but with a question, a choice, and so it continued, through centuries, through empires, through revolutions. The names changed: sea peoples, Illyrians, Cilicians, Corsairs, but the feeling remained the same, that open water could free you, or feed you, or ruin you, or make you something more than the world had allowed you to be. Tonight, perhaps, you feel that, to dot the strange, comforting thought that the world is wide, that freedom, in its rawest form, has always been found not in palaces, but in places without walls, in wind, in sails, in silence. The sea didn't care who you were, only how well you moved with it. In time, of course, the pirates of the ancient world would vanish. Some would be crushed under Rome's growing power, others would be absorbed, domesticated, turned into coastal militias, or forgotten in the pages of imperial reports. Their names rarely survived, their ships rotted, their havens were abandoned, but the idea of them remained, because piracy is not just a chapter in a history book, it's a pattern. It emerges wherever systems fail to reach the margins, wherever people are pressed to the edges, wherever wealth moves without protection and desperation follows it. It's not about evil, it's about imbalance, about how the sea, in all its beauty, can be both savior and siren. And tonight, as you lie still and listen, perhaps you can sense it to that ancient quiet, the one beneath all the noise of history, the sound of the sea before it's written about, before it's painted on scrolls or whispered in marketplaces. Just the sea, just the wind, just a boat on the horizon, no drama, no storm, just the slow sway of waves beneath you. Let that motion take you. Let it carry your thoughts wherever they wish to go. There is no need to steer now, no need to row. Just float. Just breathe. The tide knows where to go, even if you don't. The pirate ships are gone now. The Roman galleys, too. The coastal forts, the slave markets, the war fleets, they've all crumbled to dust. The only thing that remains is the water, always returning, always whispering. And as you drift deeper into rest, know that we'll return to this sea again. In the next episode, we'll sail forward in time to the Dark Ages, to Viking raids and lost coastal monasteries, where piracy takes on new shapes and new meanings. But that's for another night. For now, your ship is still, the sea is calm, you are safe, you are warm, you are free. Sleep well, traveler of history. The Roman Empire had fallen, the marble halls had cracked, the roads grew wild, the legions once feared across continents were gone or scattered. Cities that had once sparkled with order and stone now echoed with silence. And where empire receded, uncertainty rushed in like tidewater. It is the 5th century CE. The old world is collapsing, and in the vast grey inlets of the north, something stirs, a new kind of piracy, colder, wilder, less refined than its Mediterranean predecessors, less about systems, more about survival and fire. This was the age of the sea wolves. You might know them by another name, the Vikings. But let us not leap too far ahead just yet. First, imagine the post-Roman coastline of Western Europe. It is not the coast of polished Roman harbours and sea mosaics any more. It is raw, it is exposed. Towns that once thrived under Roman protection, like London, Bordeaux, or Antwerp, now stand vulnerable, unguarded and dimly lit by flickering fires. Trade is fragmented. Coinage is inconsistent. Rule, if it exists at all, is local, tribal, and fragile. The sea is no longer Rome's, it is a frontier again, and it is about to be hunted. Long before the Vikings rose from their northern fjords, long before the sagas were sung and longships carved their lines into the waters of legend, piracy had already begun to take on a new face in this darkened world. In the early medieval centuries, roughly the 5th through the 8th, there were no naval empires, no permanent navies. Even the strongest kingdoms, such as the Merovingian Franks or early Anglo-Saxons, had little ability to patrol their coasts. The sea was open not just to merchants and fishermen, but to raiders, smugglers, and outlaws. A good boat, a strong tide, and a crew of 10 could do what armies once needed hundreds to attempt: sack a town, disappear into the fog, and live free beyond the reach of kings. From the Irish Sea to the English Channel to the rugged northwestern shores of Gaul, this was a raider's paradise. Small, agile vessels hugged the coastlines, slipping between islands and estuaries, attacking isolated villages and monasteries. Unlike the Roman pirates of Cilicia, who sought riches through networks and ransoms, these early medieval pirates wanted something simpler: cattle, silver, captives, and food, sometimes even just salt. It was brutal, it was personal, it was close, and unlike the pirates of the Mediterranean, who often operated within vast political systems, these raiders were harder to define. They were not just one people, they were Irish, Britons, Saxons, Picts, Frisians. They raided each other, they raided strangers, they raided the Christian and the pagan alike. Some were land-based warriors who used boats, others lived on the sea. Some were noble-born, others exiles. The line between pirate, mercenary, and soldier was almost non-existent. If a man fought on the sea, he might be all three, depending on who was writing the story. Take the Frisian pirates. In the 7th century, the Frisians living in what is now the Netherlands became infamous for their coastal raids. Christian missionaries, traveling to convert the North Sea peoples, recorded tales of ships appearing suddenly, burning villages, and vanishing before anyone could organize a defense. These weren't massed invasions, they were stings. They were meant to hurt, not to hold. And then, of course, there were the islands, the Irish Sea and Western Scotland, a region of shifting loyalties and ever-sailing skiffs. Here, piracy blurred with politics even more. Warlords and kings would sometimes sponsor raids, not in open war, but in secret, to weaken enemies and enrich their own coffers. To raid by sea was, in many ways, to wield power invisibly. And in this world, this in-between age, this broken time after Rome and before the medieval kingdoms solidified, the most vulnerable targets were not castles or armies, but the monasteries. Why? Because they had silver, because they had books bound in golden thread, and reliquaries studded with jewels, because they kept their treasures unguarded, in the name of peace and prayer. And so, in the centuries to come, piracy would evolve into something far more sophisticated and terrifying. But even now, in these dark early decades, the seeds of that violence were already in place. Imagine the fear of the monks at Lindisfarne in 793, the year traditionally marked as the beginning of the Viking Age. But even before that, decades, perhaps centuries before, there were other forgotten raids, other flickering torches on distant hillsides, other small boats cutting across the foam in silence, long before the longships came. And now we turn our gaze northward, to the lands of ice and forest, to Norway, to Denmark, to Denmark, to Denmark, to Sweden, where a new breed of sailor is emerging, not merely to raid, but to trade, explore, conquer. These are the Vikings, yes, but they are also the next generation of pirates. Their sails will one day blot out the horizon, but for now they are only beginning. Let us pause here. Let the waves rest. Let the horizon stretch before us. In the next part, we'll step aboard a longship for the first time and sail with the Vikings as they become the most feared pirates Europe has ever known. But for now, let your breath slow, like the tide going out. The torches in the coastal watchtowers have gone dim. The ocean is quiet again, and you can drift. The mist rolls thick across the northern sea. It clings to your skin, cool and damp, and the salt is heavy in the air, sharp and alive. There is no sun today, only a dull, cold light pressing down from above. The sky is grey, the water is darker, and cutting through that water like a whisper of violence is a ship. Long, narrow, beautiful, in a way few things in this world are. Its hull low to the sea, its dragon-headed prow silent, watching, gliding like a predator in shallow water. This is not a fantasy. This is not a myth. This is a Viking longship, and you are aboard it now. Let the world behind you fade, the modern streets, the digital glow, the rush and the noise. Forget all that. Set it down. You are far away now. Here, on this wind-bitten vessel, are 40 men, maybe 50. Some row, others wait. You do not speak much. There is no need. You know what lies ahead. So does everyone. This is a raid. But it is also a ritual. And you, perhaps, are not a hardened warrior, not yet. You are young. Maybe this is your first voyage. You were raised near the fjords. You learned the sea as a child. You can read the wind by its taste. You know the rhythms of tide and sail better than you know your own heartbeat. This raid is not about gold alone. It's about proving yourself, about building honor, about feeding your family. And, for some, it is simply the only way forward. The land back home is poor. The kings grow greedy. There is not enough to go around. But the sea is endless. So here you are, rowing into history. Long before pirates flew skull and crossbones flags, the Norsemen wove ravens into their sails. They did not see themselves as criminals. They were not pirates in the modern sense. The term would not even have meant much to them. They were raiders, yes, but also traders, settlers, explorers. The same ship that burned a coastal village in Northumbria might, weeks later, be tied up in a port in Francia, its crew bartering walrus ivory or amber with Carolingian merchants. This duality, this ability to be both plunderer and partner, was central to Viking piracy. They weren't outsiders like the Cilician pirates of old. They were mobile agents of power, carving out influence with both blade and bargain. Some even became rulers in the lands they first sacked, Dublin, York, Kiev. But tonight, we're with them on the water. And tonight, this is a raid. The longship slows, the oars come in. You are approaching a narrow river mouth, a shallow estuary that leads to a monastery or perhaps a trading post. It is unguarded. Most are. The local king has no ships to patrol the coast. No fortress watches this far out. There may be a wooden palisade, or a bell tower, or a dozen peasants in the fields. But nothing that can stop 40 men with axes and intent. And here's what's important. This is precise, not chaotic, not wild. It is timed, learned, practiced. You know the tide. You know how long you have before the alarm spreads. You know how quickly to load what can be carried. Silver chalices, crosses, robes woven with gold thread, food, tools, slaves. Whatever the gods, or the gods' servants, have left unguarded. The longship grounds softly on the muddy bank. The men move like one, some with shields, some with torches, one with a small curved horn blown not as a war cry, but as a signal to begin. You stay back, you guard the boat, you watch the shoreline, the tree line, the river's curve. Minutes pass, the sound of shouting, screams, then silence again, then the clink of metal, the dragging of sacks, heavy footfalls returning. They are coming back now, the others' blood on their clothes, yes, but none of them wounded, not this time. They laugh, they pass around a flask. Someone is humming a song. You recognize it, it's old. Your grandmother sang it. A lullaby, oddly enough. That too is Viking piracy. Brutal and human in the same breath. So who were they really? Not just these raiders, but the pirate culture they built. It is easy to mythologize the Vikings, to picture them as horn-helmeted barbarians. But real history is quieter and far more compelling. They came from harsh lands with short summers and rocky soil. Farming was possible, but hard. Winters were long. Hierarchies were rigid. And so, in the absence of fertile land, they turned outward, first to fish, then to trade, and then to take. It began in the late 700s, grew through the 800s, and by the 9th century, their raids were systematic, not just hit-and-run assaults, but coordinated campaigns across vast stretches of coastline. Longships could sail in rivers where no one believed ships could go. They struck inland, sacked cities, even stormed Paris. More than once, some kings tried to fight them, others paid them. These bribes were called Danegeld, Danish gold, payment for peace. But peace, as always, was temporary, even among the Vikings. There were pirates within pirates' outlaws who defied their own leaders, who raided without sanction, who refused any oaths. These were the true pirates of the North, hunted by their own kind, but often the most dangerous of all, and like the Silacines before them, the Vikings knew how to vanish. A longship could retreat into mist faster than any cavalry could follow. By the time word spread, they were gone. Back to the islands, back to the fjords, back to the silence of their homeland, until the next tide called them out again. Now, the ship is moving again. The sails are up. The plunder is hidden beneath furs and barrels. You row quietly. No one speaks of what was taken. There is no need. The fire is behind you now, flickering in the pre-dawn haze. Soon, it will be as if you were never there at all, and you feel something strange, not fear, not joy, not something in between. The sea has taken you in. It has changed you. You are no longer just a farmer's son. You have touched something ancient, something powerful. The line between survival and violence is thinner than you ever imagined. And now you have crossed it. That is piracy, too. Let the ship glide now. Let the horizon grow pale with the rising sun. Let the long oars rest against the sides of the hull, dripping with seawater. Let the wind pull you home. There will be time for glory later. There will be songs. But for now, rest. In the final part of this episode, we will look at what the Vikings left behind and how their legacy shaped piracy for centuries after they were gone. But for now, breathe with the waves. Let the water carry you. Let the past settle and drift. The oars are silent now. The longship has pulled back into the inlet, tucked between cliffs or among low islands, its hull scraping softly against pebbled shores. There's no celebration, just quiet, the kind that follows effort. the kind that comes after firelight, when only embers remain. The raid is over, the spoils are stored, the stories, if they are told, will come later, over winter feasts, or whispered at night beneath fur cloaks. But for now, the only sound is the sea lapping gently at the keel, and the breath of the men as they drift into exhausted sleep. And so we drift to Dot as we close our eyes on this second chapter of Piracy's long story. Let us not only recall the fire and the axe and the splash of water under hurried oars, but also the stillness, the ancient rhythm, the strange calm that always follows violence. Let us linger here in this early medieval quiet. It's easy, now, to see the Vikings as something distant, something romanticized or simplified. Horned helmets, which they never wore, shouting warriors, raging beards. But those are costumes, modern projections. The real Vikings, like the real pirates they were more nuanced than that. They were settlers and farmers, sailors and storytellers, blacksmiths and shipbuilders. And yes, they were raiders, they were pirates, but only part of the time, only when it served them, only when opportunity called. And piracy, as it often does, began to change them too. The more they raided, the more they saw, the more they took, the more they understood what other cultures possessed. They brought back not just silver and cloth but ideas, scripts, coins, religion. They were not just burning the world, they were absorbing it. By the late 9th century, some Vikings stopped raiding entirely. They settled instead, built towns, married local women, adopted foreign customs. In places like Dublin and York, these former pirates became part of the social fabric. Lords, kings, traders. They buried their ships, quite literally, in the ground filled with possessions for the afterlife, and in doing so, they left behind traces of the sea-bound violence that had once defined them. But something lingered, because piracy is not just a moment, it's a pattern, a possibility, and the longships, even buried, echoed in the centuries that followed. Close your eyes now and imagine. The Viking longships are gone, their sails folded, their planks rotting slowly, beneath layers of moss and mud. The monasteries they once raided are rebuilt. The villagers who once feared them now tell stories about them, half myth, half memory. And yet the coastline is still there. The tide still rolls in and out. The sea unchanged, and somewhere perhaps in another century, perhaps under another name, someone else will take to the water, driven by hunger or ambition or exile, and they will look out across the horizon, just as those Norse raiders once did, and wonder what they might take, what they might become, and whether the sea will carry them safely home. Because piracy never ends, it only moves. It finds the cracks in the world. The coasts too vast to guard, the ships too heavy with wealth, the islands too quiet. It moves in silence, just like the longship on a still night, and in time. That shadow will reappear not in the north, but in the south, not in fur, but in linen, not with axes, but with cutlasses. The golden age is still centuries away, but it is coming, so rest now. Let the wind ease, let the fire die low, let your breath rise and fall like a tide. The Norsemen are gone, their sails have vanished into the morning fog. Their echoes, however, remain in the language of the sea, in the shape of the coastlines, in the very idea that someone, somewhere, might still be waiting beyond the waves, waiting, watching. But tonight, no one comes. Tonight, there is only peace, and you, warm, still, breathing with the rhythm of the ocean, free to drift wherever your mind will take you. Sleep well, traveler of forgotten seas. The past is quiet now. The world has changed again. The longships are gone. The Norsemen who once haunted the northern coasts have vanished into history, some buried in icy ground, others transformed into kings and merchants in foreign lands. The coasts of Europe are quieter for now. The tide has retreated from the north, but in the south, the wind is rising again. A different sea stirs beneath the moonlight, not the cold, churning Atlantic or the windswept Irish Sea, but the deep, ancient blue of the Mediterranean dot, a sea of stone cities and sunburnt shores, of olives and incense, of marble ruins and blood-stained banners. It is here between Africa and Europe, Arabia and Byzantium, that piracy is reborn, not as a whisper in the fog, but as a weapon, a holy act, a profession. And this time, the pirates sail under banners not of bone or beast, but of God. The year is 1095. Pope Urban II has just spoken in Clermont, calling the First Crusade. His voice rings like a trumpet across Christendom. He calls for knights and kings, peasants and pilgrims, to take up the cross and march east, to reclaim the Holy Land from Muslim rule. But what does this have to do with piracy? Everything, because, in the centuries that follow roughly from the 11th to the 14th century, the Mediterranean will become not just a battleground of armies, but of ships, of galleys, corsairs, and merchant vessels sailing under Christian and Muslim flags, alike, some sanctioned by governments, others operating in the murky waters between war, profit, and faith. This is the age of the corsair, and the sea is their battlefield. But let us pause and breathe. Let the sails rise. Let the wind take us to the beginning. Imagine you are standing on the cliffs of southern Italy, or perhaps on the coast of Sicily. The sun is bright, and the water below is clear, glittering, impossibly blue. You hear birds, the rustle of citrus trees in the breeze, but then distant, barely audible shout, the clatter of hooves, the ringing of bells. You look out to sea, and you see them, ships, small, fast, unfamiliar. Their sails are different, their prows low and sharp, their crews dark-robed, agile, armed. They do not land in force, they strike in moments. A village burns, a priest is taken, a handful of women vanish, and before anyone can react, the ships are gone again, back into the dazzling Mediterranean light. They are Muslim corsairs, launched from the ports of North Africa or the Levant, Tunisia, Tripoli, Alexandria. These aren't wild pirates. These are men backed by powerful rulers. Some are part of official fleets, others are mercenaries, answering only to silver and to Allah. But they are not alone. For every corsair that sails under the crescent moon, there is a Christian counterpart who sails under the cross, from Pisa, from Genoa, from Venice, Italian city-states, rich from trade and locked in bitter rivalry, begin to develop their own naval force, ostensibly to protect merchants, but increasingly to raid each other, to blockade, to seize cargo, to punish enemies and grow wealthy in the process. Soon, the line between pirate and admiral becomes blurred. A Venetian ship in one port is a diplomat, in another, a pirate. And then, there are the knights. Perhaps you've heard of the Knights Templar, or the Knights Hospitaller, or the Knights of St. John. They are warriors sworn to religious orders, crusaders who defend Christian lands in the East. But when those lands fall, what do? They take to the sea. Inroads, in Cyprus, later in Malta. The knights form a new identity, not as defenders of castles, but as pirates of faith. They raid Muslim shipping lanes, capture crews, take prisoners, sometimes enslave, sometimes ransom. They believe they are doing God's work, fighting the unbeliever with cutlass and cannon. But again, the truth is more complicated, because often these knights raid Christian ships too. If the cargo is tempting enough, if the crew is foreign, if the excuse is convenient. In a sea full of trade and suspicion, anyone can be an enemy. The medieval Mediterranean becomes a chessboard, a series of shifting alliances, broken truces, surprise attacks, betrayals. Corsairs and captains switch loyalties. Kings hire pirates to raid their enemies, then brand them outlaws the moment peace is signed. And always there are the civilians, the merchant crews, the fishermen, the coastal villagers, living in fear, watching the horizon not for weather, but for sails, never knowing whether the next ship brings spices or fire. Now, let's slow even further. Breathe in. Let's float gently into one of these stories, lost to time, but real. It is the 13th century. You are a sailor aboard a small Christian merchant galley, traveling from Marseille to Acre. Your ship carries wine, grain, and finely woven cloth. You sail under the protection of a local count, and you believe yourself safe. But somewhere off the coast of Crete, you see them. 3 fast-moving ships, Latin-rigged, sleek, painted black at the waterline. You try to outrun them, but your galley is too heavy, your crew too few. They board you. No flags, no words, just knives, ropes, and the press of foreign hands. You are tied, blindfolded. The cargo is stripped bare. The ship set adrift. You don't even know who they were. Mamluk, Corsairs, pirates from Algiers, disguised Genoese rivals. It doesn't matter to the sea. You are all the same. This is the lesson of the medieval Mediterranean. There are no clear sides, only banners, only blades, only boats moving fast, landing hard, and vanishing before justice arrives. The pirates of this age are not the misfits of later centuries. They are embedded, they are political, they are tolerated when convenient, and hunted when not. They raid and prey in the same breath. They loot while wearing crosses. They enslave while quoting scripture. And they believe, many of them, that they are righteous. That's what makes this chapter of piracy so haunting. Not because it is wild, but because it is organized, because it hides behind banners, because it wears the robes of religion while sharpening the knives of conquest. As the sun lowers now over the Mediterranean, the sails blur on the horizon. Some are pirates, some are knights, some are merchants, but from this distance you can't tell, and neither could they. Let that image settle in your mind. Let the water go still. Let the names fade. Let the banners lower. The sea remains the same. It accepts all who dare it. It judges no one, and it keeps its secrets well. There are places in history where piracy isn't an act. It's a location, a harbor, a tower, a sound in the night. If the first pirates of history lurked in coves and vanished into the tide, and if the Vikings struck from windswept fjords and disappeared among the cliffs, then here, in the medieval Mediterranean, piracy finds something new. A home, fortified, sanctified, welcomed. Entire cities, proud, wealthy, influential, turn piracy from a desperate raid into an institution, a trade, a way of life, and for many, a path to power. These are the pirate cities, and tonight you walk among them. Let your thoughts drift now, As we sail into the 13th and 14th centuries, a time of fragile peace, roving fleets, and tangled alliances, picture the North African coast, warmed by a golden sun, with narrow stone alleys and whitewashed houses stacked above the sea. Markets buzz with spices and silks. Minarets rise in the distance, calling the faithful to prayer. But just beyond the city gates, the docks, the shipyards, the shadowed taverns where sailors and pirates trade more than goods, they trade information, loyalties, threats. This is Tunis. This is Tripoli. This is Algiers. And later, Sail, Tituin, and Bain. North Africa's Barbary coast. Here, piracy isn't outlawed. It's licensed, encouraged, rewarded. These cities are ruled not by kings, but by regents, beys, and corsair captains, figures who command fleets, control the flow of tribute, and balance the line between diplomacy and violence. With every passing week, they are sponsored, sometimes, by great Islamic powers like the Mamluks in Egypt or the Hafsids in Tunisia. But they also act independently, like sea lords, with courts made not of gold and silk, but of gunpowder, anchors, and iron chains. Let's walk through one now. Choose Algiers, a rising pirate capital. The smell of tar and brine fills the air. The docks creak with motion. Ships are everywhere, long, narrow galleys powered by oars, their sides fitted with gun ports, their hulls low to the sea for quick approach. Painted eyes peer from the prow, symbols meant to protect or intimidate, or both. Below deck, cannons, tools, captives, rumors dot on the quay. Men haggle over stolen goods, saffron, textiles, Venetian glass. There are locals, yes, but also Turks, Greeks, Jews, Spaniards, even Englishmen. Corsair crews are international, multilingual, mixed in faith and purpose. Some have converted to Islam, others keep Christian icons hidden beneath their tunics. All serve the sea. And among them walks the Ricer sea captain, maybe once a fisherman, maybe once a slave, now a man with 4 ships and a personal guard. He speaks 6 languages, makes deals with sultans and bishops, and knows the defences of every Christian port between Malta and Marseille in a single morning. He might plan a raid, negotiate ransom, and write letters to a French nobleman offering protection for a coastal estate for a price. Of course, this is not wild piracy. This is organized extortion. A pirate state, disguised as a port, and across the water, the Christian world responds. In Malta, the Knights Hospitaller have dug in. They, too, operate from a fortified city, Valletta, where massive walls bristle with cannon, and every street ends in stone. From here, the knights launch their own ships, sleek, black-hulled galleys crewed by soldiers in the service of God. Yet just as skilled in piracy as their Muslim rivals, they fly under the flag of the cross. But make no mistake, they raid for silver. They take slaves. They seize merchant cargoes. And in their logbooks, some ships are marked not as enemy combatants, but simply richly laden. To be Corsair or Crusader in this world was often a matter of branding. The tactics were the same. Fast approach, grappling hooks, smoke and fire, fight, surrender, or burn. Sometimes, the only difference between a pirate and a patriot was who paid you. And yet, in this chaos, an entire economy emerged. When ships were captured, their crews were often taken alive, not out of mercy, but value. A sailor from Genoa might be worth 100 gold coins in ransom. A nobleman, 10 times that. Captives were marched through streets, displayed in chains, and held in prisons known as bognosa, word that once meant bathhouse but became synonymous with slave pens. Whole European towns organized ransom funds, charitable guilds, whose sole purpose was to rescue those taken by Corsairs. Friars were trained as negotiators. Some spent decades sailing from city to city, pleading for the release of fishermen, soldiers, even children. And always, beneath it all, was the sea, unconcerned, unmoved. It watched while Christian ships fought, Muslim ships, while both plundered grain convoys and stormed island fortresses, while prisoners changed hands and empires shook hands. The Mediterranean remained vast, deep, and patient. It had seen Phoenicians, Romans, Vikings, now Corsairs, and it would see more now. Rest here a moment longer. Close your eyes and imagine yourself aboard one of these ships, not during a raid, but at anchor. Night has fallen. The stars are bright. The water glows with faint phosphorescence. The ship rocks gently. You lie in a canvas hammock, tucked between cargo nets and coiled rope. You can hear the crew breathing, muttering in half a dozen languages. Somewhere nearby, someone is sharpening a blade. But for now, there is no battle, no shouting, no flame, only the hush of the waves against the hull, only the creak of the mast, only the strange, timeless sense that you are part of something larger, something older than borders, older than crowns, older even than belief. You are part of the sea's own story now, and that story will go on. Now the sails are lowered, the oars are stilled, the ports are silent, but the memory of them lingers like the tang of salt on wind, or the faint echo of distant bells across the water. The holy wars have quieted, for now, but the sea remembers, and we return to it, one last time tonight, not to witness a battle or recount a raid, but to listen, to feel, to trace the slow ripples of history as they move outward, wider, fainter, into the present. The age of medieval piracy is ending, not with a thunderclap, but like a tide withdrawing in silence. What remains are questions and ghosts. Think of all that was born in this era. Think of Algiers, Tunis, Tripolithos, hot, wind-drenched cities of stone and copper and cannon. What began as trade ports became engines of war. Piracy here wasn't rebellion. It was a business, a foreign policy, a tool of states, both vast and small, and often the very survival of these cities depended on their corsairs, those hard-eyed sea captains who knew every reef, every trick of the wind, every weakness of the Christian fleets they hunted. But were they villains? Were they holy warriors? Or were they simply men, fathers, sons, wanderers, driven by the rules of their time and the pull of the horizon? It is too easy to judge them from here, from the comfort of centuries later, from the stillness of a modern room where the wind is outside the window, not inside your lungs. Because if you lived, then if your city had no army, and your people no voice, what would you become, if not a pirate? And if your king offered you a ship, a sword, and absolution in the name of Christ, would you not sail? Would you not fight? There is something deeper here than treasure or conquest, something human, something timeless, because the Mediterranean in the Middle Ages wasn't just a sea, it was a mirror. Every ship reflected the people who sent it. Every raid reflected the world's fears, and every act of piracy, whether cloaked in faith or claimed as justice, revealed how fragile our rules really are. Kings sanctioned pirates when it suited them. Churches blessed raiders if their enemies wore turbans, and corsairs prayed before battle not to survive, but to be right. even in bloodshed. They believed they were doing the work of something higher. And that's the most haunting part, because in the silence that follows a raid in the wreckage of a town, or the quiet deck of a drifting ship, there are no saints, only survivors. Let us pause here. The stars are out again. The sea is calm. You are safe now, not in a fortress, not under a banner, but in your breath, in the rhythm of waves lapping gently against a wooden hull. You are not aboard a warship tonight. You are aboard memory, floating, watching, drifting across centuries. You see the outlines of galleys in the moonlight now, skeletons wrecked on forgotten shores, their names lost, their captains dead, the men who once feared them, long gone, but the water beneath them is the same, salted, deep, patient. You pass over the remnants of towers, once built to spot incoming pirates. The stones are crumbling now. Wildflowers grow where lookouts once stood. No alarm is sounded, no bells ring. You pass over islands once torn apart by Corsair raids. Now they are quiet. Only goats and gulls remain. And the graves, and in the hush of this passage, you begin to feel something shift inside you. Not dread, not sadness, but a sense of scale, of how vast history is, of how much came before you, and of how many stories, good and terrible, are buried beneath every calm horizon. But the sea never holds a grudge. It remembers everything, yes, but only gently. It carries no anger, no shame, no pride in the blood that once churned in its tides. It just holds the past, cradles it, rocks it slowly, as it rocks you now, because you too are drifting, not just through time, but into sleep, into a kind of quiet where the names and flags no longer matter, where the pirate and the priest are just silhouettes in your mind, where the water is the only constant, and it is gentle, it is steady, it is enough. Let go. Now, let the sails go slack. Let the cannons rust. Let the voices of captains and kings fade into the waves. You are no longer part of their war. You are no longer bound to their faith. You are simply floating, and that is all you need. The holy wars are over for tonight. The Corsairs sleep in their towers, their ships moored, their swords sheathed, and you are safe. The sea has no judgment, only depth, only silence, and in that silence you are free to fall gently, quietly, into the deepest harbor of all, sleep. The year is no longer 900 or 1200 or even 1400. The medieval world slips behind us like a coastline fading in the fog. Cathedrals grow taller, cannons grow stronger, and ships become longer, sleeker, faster, designed not just to cross channels but entire oceans. In the east, a fierce, brilliant power rises, eager to own the sea. The Ottoman Empire has taken Constantinople, and with it, a new dream, to rule the waves. But the oceans are not easily ruled, the wind cannot be bribed, the tide cannot be conquered. So they turn to an age-old tool, pirates. Only now, these men are no longer called pirates, they are called Corsars. Picture the shores of Anatolia, where the Aegean Sea laps against rugged coves and sharp cliffs, olive trees leaning toward the endless blue horizon. Here, in the late 1400s, two brothers are born not into wealth or title, but into the salt air and sails of the sea. Their names will echo across continents, Arouge and Kiza, later known as Barbarossa, the Redbeard. As boys, they learn to fish, to dive, to trade, to fight. By adulthood, they are no longer mere sailors, but captains, corsairs, and instruments of empire. Arouge builds his crew and fleet, growing bolder with raids on Rhodes, Sicily, and the Christian coasts, stretching from Spain to Greece. Each victory brings prestige, each coin and captive builds his name. When Arouge dies in battle, Kiza rises, becoming the master of the fleet. More than a pirate, he becomes the admiral of the Ottoman navy. Barbarossa, once a fisherman's son, transforms into the terror of the Mediterranean. His empire is not built of stone castles, but of ships. Feel the wind gently billow as you imagine. The Mediterranean, alive with Venetian galleys, prowling like hunting dogs, Spanish warships heavy with gold, and the corsair fleets darting from port to port, untouchable and unpredictable. These corsairs do not simply raid, they govern. Piracy becomes no longer scattered acts of desperation but state-sponsored violence, a hidden system fueled by gold and glory. To the Ottomans, it is strategy. To the Spanish, terror. To the sailors caught in between fate and the sea, it just listens. Now, shift your gaze to Europe, where kings, queens, generals, and popes face a bitter truth. They cannot protect every coast or defend every ship, so they do the unexpected. They join piracy, not with swords and torches, but with paper, seals, scrolls, and the invention of the letter of marque. Suddenly, piracy is legalized, not for all, only those pledging loyalty to the crown, agreeing to plunder the right enemies, and promising to share spoils with the state. These men are privateers, but their actions mirror pirates. Imagine the coasts of France, England, and the Netherlands, where men meet in dockside taverns, draw maps by candlelight, and speak of treasure fleets and riches. A nobleman stamps a letter of marque and hands it to a captain with a blessing. The pirate smiles, no longer outlaw, but patriot. Soon, the seas fill again with sanctioned violent corsairs, flying flags by day, burning towns by night, and celebrated, rather than scorned. Barbarossa is not alone. Others rise as rivals and legends. Turgot race, Dragut, the sword of Islam. John Ward, the English pirate who converts to Islam and rules from Tunis as Yusuf race. And Barbarossa's successors, who carry the Ottoman banner into battle, not for gold alone, but to balance the world. Piracy becomes politics, religion, and empire. Yet even kings must sleep, sea lords fade. As the 16th century ends, the golden age of Ottoman corsairs dims. New threats rise, new oceans call, but piracy endures, always adapting, becoming what the world demands: rebel, patriot, criminal, or tool. And the sea, it watches still, holding the bones of captains, whispering names of ships lost in fog, carrying the scent of fire from long ago coastal raids, and rocking you gently toward sleep. Now rest. Let the battles fade, the flags lower, the names Barbarossa, Dragut, War drift away like ship lanterns on the horizon. You are no longer in a time of empire or conquest, but in the quiet that follows. The sea is calm, sails are still, stars burn low and patient. Somewhere in the vast dark waits another pirate, another port breathes, another story begins. But for now, this one pauses. Let your breath match the tide, your mind unfurled like canvas. Let go. Sleep, traveler. Sleep, sailor. Sleep, watcher of history. There will be more, and you will return. The dawn of the 16th century casts long shadows over the seas of Europe. Empires stretch their fingers across the oceans, greed and ambition sparkling like sunlight on restless waters. Spain, Portugal, England and France race to claim new worlds. Treasure fleets laden with silver and gold carving routes like arteries through the ocean, but these riches do not flow unchallenged. Across the waves, a new breed of seafarers rise, privators sanctioned by crown and country, who sail not for themselves but for queen and king, for glory, for plunder, and for national pride. Imagine England under the rule of Queen Elizabeth I, a monarch with an iron will and an unyielding gaze toward the new world. England's navy is growing, but so is the appetite for wealth and revenge, especially against Spain's vast empire. Enter Francis Drake, a man who will become the very embodiment of privateering's dual nature, hero to some, pirate to others. Drake's voyages are daring raids, lightning strikes that cripple Spanish treasure fleets and harbors. But because he carries a letter of marque, he is protected, even celebrated, as a patriot fighting Spain's dominance. Drake's exploits are legendary. He circumnavigates the globe, plundering along the way, returning to England laden with riches that bolster the crown's coffers and England's naval power. To the Spanish, he is Eldrac, the dragon, a scourge of their ships and colonies. To his own people, he is a knight of the sea, a symbol of defiance against a dominant empire. But Drake's story is only one thread in a tapestry of conflict and cunning on the high seas dot across the channel. The French crown employs its own privateers to challenge Spanish and Portuguese supremacy. Jean Fleury, a French privateer, makes his mark by intercepting the first treasure fleets returning from the Americas. His daring raids signal a new era where European powers no longer hesitate to wage war through proxies at sea, using private men to disrupt rivals, trade, and expand influence. These privateers are skilled sailors, ruthless fighters, and savvy navigators who understand the delicate dance of politics and piracy. Yet privateering is a dangerous game. Letters of marque offer legal cover, but not immunity. Captured privateers risk execution as pirates if their commissions are questioned or if politics shift. The line between patriot and outlaw is thin and often crossed in moments of fortune or misfortune. Many sailors blur this boundary, choosing whichever flag offers the best profit, and alliances can change with the tides. This fluidity makes the seas a volatile chessboard where kings move pieces that are men with swords and cannons, as privateers disrupt treasure fleets and raid colonial ports. European navies evolve in response. Fleets grow larger, ships more heavily armed, and naval tactics become more complex. The once loosely organized raiders begin to operate with increasing sophistication, sometimes coordinating with official navies in large-scale engagements. Piracy and privateering shape the geopolitical landscape of the era, influencing treaties, wars, and the fate of emerging empires. While the Mediterranean had long been a center of Corsair activity, the Atlantic becomes the new battleground. The Americas' riches and the expanding trade routes attract attention from every corner of Europe. Pirates and privateers alike set their sights on these waters, turning Caribbean coves and West African coasts into pirate havens and strategic outposts. The stories of captains and crews from this era ripple through history, inspiring tales of daring and treachery that still capture imaginations. Yet beneath the glory and gold lies a harsh reality. The life of a privateer is perilous. Long months at sea, brutal combat, disease, and betrayal are constant companions. Captives are taken, sometimes enslaved, sometimes ransomed, and entire coastal communities live under the shadow of these maritime raiders. The ocean, though vast and free, is a place of relentless danger and shifting loyalties. But even as these privateers carve their legends, the seeds are sown for the decline of this era. Increasing naval power, changing laws, and the growing influence of centralized states begin to clamp down on piracy and privateering alike. The age of the legal pirate edges toward its twilight, giving way to new forms of naval warfare and colonial control. And so, as the 16th century moves forward, the sea remains a place of both opportunity and terror, a place where the ambitions of empires and the desires of men collide beneath endless skies. The legacy of these privateers is complex, a mix of patriotism, plunder, bravery, and betrayal woven into the fabric of history like knots in a sailor's rope. Now, let the waves carry you gently away from these tales of fire and steel. Let your breath slow, your mind soften, and your body relax. The ships may have sailed, the battles ended, but the sea remains vast, patient, and eternal, and it holds your place, rocking you softly toward rest, toward dreams where the stories of pirates and privateers whisper quietly, waiting for you to return. As the 16th century fades, the stage is set for one of history's most vivid chapters, the golden age of piracy in the Caribbean. The vast riches flowing from the New World, the tangled web of rival empires, and the often lax enforcement of maritime law create a perfect storm for pirates to rise, not just as agents of empire, but as freebooters chasing their own fortunes. This era is a world apart from the earlier Corsairs and privateers, where law and loyalty were complex but clearer. Here, the line blurs beyond recognition, and pirates become legends in their own right. Picture the turquoise waters of the Caribbean Sea, shimmering under the tropical sun. Hidden coves and mangrove-lined islands offer perfect refuge for pirate ships. These pirates are not king's men, but men who reject the chains of society and law, who carve out their own codes of conduct, and who seize freedom on the high seas with gunpowder and cutlass in hand. They are sailors, adventurers, former privateers, escaped slaves, and adventurers all, bound by the sea and the promise of wealth. The decline of official privateering commissions leaves many men without legal protection. Yet, with the skills and hunger for plunder, they turn to piracy, raiding merchant ships, attacking poorly defended ports, and sometimes collaborating with colonial governors who look the other way for a share of the loot. Islands like Nassau in the Bahamas become pirate republics, chaotic but vibrant communities ruled by pirates' codes rather than crowns. Here, democracy and brutality mix in equal measure. Among these pirates are towering figures, whose names have echoed through the centuries. There is Henry Morgan, a Welsh privateer turned pirate who led daring raids against Spanish strongholds, often blurring the line between privateer and outlaw. His brutal yet cunning campaigns made him a hero in England and a villain in Spain. Then there is Blackbeard, Edward Teach, whose fearsome appearance and ruthless tactics made him the terror of the seas. His ship, the Queen Anne's Revenge, and his legendary beard braided with lit fuses became symbols of pirate myth and menace. Yet, these figures are only glimpses of a larger picture. Pirate crews operated under surprisingly democratic principles. Captains were elected, spoils shared, and harsh discipline maintained. Codes of conduct detailed behavior, compensation for injuries, and conflict resolution. Pirates were pragmatic, fiercely independent, and skilled sailors who thrived in a world where the normal rules did not apply. But piracy was not just adventure and gold. It was also violence, hardship, and uncertainty. Battles were brutal and often fatal. Disease, starvation, and the merciless ocean took their toll. Pirate havens were as dangerous as they were free, filled with rivalries and betrayals, and the growing might of European navies meant that this golden age was always under threat. By the early 18th century, naval powers launched concerted campaigns to end piracy's reign. Famous pirate strongholds were captured or abandoned. Laws were tightened, and infamous pirates were hunted relentlessly. Trials and executions became common as governments sought to restore order to the seas and protect their expanding colonial empires. Yet, even as this age fades, the legacy of these pirates endures. Their stories of rebellion, freedom, greed, and survival have woven themselves into culture, inspiring books, films, and endless fascination. But beyond myth lies the reality of men and women who lived on the edge of the known world, carving their own destinies amid the endless waves. As you drift now, let the warm Caribbean breeze cool and calm your mind. Let the sound of gentle waves and creaking masts soothe your thoughts. Imagine the vast, open sea, the flicker of distant lanterns on pirate ships, the silent stars watching over hidden coves. This world of pirates, beyond the Hollywood glamour, was raw, dangerous, and endlessly alive. Rest, now traveler. Let the sea cradle you, as it once carried the dreams and fears of pirates long past. Their stories lie beneath the waves, whispered in the wind, waiting for your return. Sleep well, for tomorrow the voyage continues. As the 18th century dawned, the turbulent era known as the Golden Age of Piracy began to wane under the relentless pressure of expanding imperial ambitions and the growing might of organized navies. For over a century, the Caribbean and Atlantic had echoed with the cries of cutlasses, cannon fire, and the tales of swashbuckling rogues who ruled the waves with a chaotic freedom unmatched elsewhere. Yet, this world where pirate enclaves operated like miniature republics, where the line between outlaw and privateer, blurred in the smoke of battle, was coming to an end. The great empires of Europe, their wealth swollen by colonies and trade, recognized that unchecked piracy was a threat not just to commerce, but to their very sovereignty and order. The age of lawlessness was being replaced by the age of law and imperial control. The British Royal Navy, in particular, underwent a remarkable transformation during this period. What had once been a modest fleet, charged primarily with coastal defense, grew into the preeminent maritime power of the world. Britain's leaders poured resources into the construction of powerful ships of the line, bristling with dozens of cannons, capable of outgunning and outmaneuvering any pirate vessel. Their sailors trained relentlessly in navigation, gunnery, and discipline, evolving from scattered crews into a professional fighting force. These ships began patrolling the trade routes relentlessly, hunting pirate ships, and securing the sea lanes that were vital for Britain's growing empire. Imagine vast squadrons moving like shadows across the Caribbean, the Atlantic, and even the Indian Ocean, their sails filling with wind and their hulls cutting through the waves as pirate havens came under siege one by one. Nassau, once the infamous Republic of Pirates, became a target for the combined might of the Royal Navy and colonial militias. Pirate leaders, once untouchable, were captured or killed. Their trials were swift and public, designed to discourage others from following their path. The infamous gibbet became a symbol of the Crown's resolve to gain. Bodies of executed pirates displayed at harbors as a grim warning to those who might dare defy imperial law. This crackdown was not solely British. Spain, France, and the Netherlands, each with their own vast colonial holdings and commercial interests, launched their own coordinated efforts to eradicate piracy. For Spain, The loss of treasure ships was a dire blow to their imperial economy, and their naval fleets grew more vigilant and aggressive. France, with its own Caribbean colonies, increased patrols and collaborated with British forces when interests aligned. The Dutch, with merchant fleets operating across the globe, tightened security and passed laws that made privateering increasingly regulated and piracy intolerable. As governments outlawed privateering, the legal grey area where many pirates had thrived began to close. Letters of marque, those royal licenses that allowed privateers to attack enemy ships, were revoked or more tightly controlled. What had once been a government's sanctioned form of warfare became suspect, and those caught without official sanction were branded criminals without mercy. The evolving international treaties and laws of the sea sought to bring order and predictability to maritime conflict, leaving little room for the freebooters who once skirted between nations. This period also saw the rise of organized naval law enforcement. Colonial governors appointed naval officers specifically tasked with hunting pirates. Intelligence networks developed as informants, merchants, and local inhabitants supplied information about pirate movements and hideouts. Naval battles were no longer isolated skirmishes, but part of sustained campaigns to root out piracy from every corner of the globe. The seas that had seemed limitless and wild became mapped, controlled, and patrolled by the forces of empire. Despite this tightening noose, piracy did not vanish overnight. Rather, it adapted. Pirates shifted theaters, moving into the Indian Ocean, the Red Sea, and even the waters off West Africa, where European powers had less control. The famous pirate Henry Every staged raids on the rich Mughal treasure ships, drawing the attention of distant empires and forcing new international naval responses. Smugglers, corsairs, and rogue privateers continued to ply their trade in less accessible waters, sustaining the shadowy underworld of maritime crime. At the same time, the cultural legacy of piracy began to take root more deeply in the popular imagination. The gruesome reality of pirate life, violence, hardship, and uncertainty was softened and transformed into romantic tales of adventure and freedom. Ballads, broadsides, plays, and later novels began painting pirates as daring rebels, charming rogues, or symbols of resistance against tyranny. Figures like Blackbeard and Bonnie and Calico Jack became larger-than-life characters, their exploits embellished and mythologized far beyond historical fact. The real lives of these pirates, however, were complex and often brutal. They lived in precarious communities bound by strict codes of conduct that governed division of spoils, conduct during battle, and discipline. They faced the constant threat of disease, starvation, betrayal, and death. Many were former sailors, escaped slaves, or disenfranchised men seeking freedom and fortune on the sea. Their world was one of extremes. Intense camaraderie mixed with ruthless violence, fleeting freedom shadowed by the ever-present risk of capture. As the century advanced, the grip of imperial navies tightened further, and piracy became less viable. Coastal towns rebuilt their defenses. Merchant ships traveled in convoys protected by warships, and colonial administrations established courts and legal systems designed to prosecute piracy swiftly and harshly. The pirates' era was ending, but its spirit lived on in the memories of those who sailed, in the stories told around campfires, and in the enduring fascination with these rebels of the sea. Now, as you settle into rest, imagine the vast ocean stretching endlessly beneath the stars, a place once wild and lawless, now claimed by mighty fleets and governed by laws forged in smoke and steel. Feel the gentle rocking of waves beneath a starlit sky, the whisper of the sea breeze calming your thoughts. The stories of pirates, privateers, and navies may have shifted like tides, but the ocean's heartbeat remains constant, steady, and patient. Sleep now, traveler. Let the rhythm of the sea soothe you as it once did, sailors long gone. The tale of piracy continues hidden in history, alive in legend, and waiting for your return. With the pirate threat looming large over the trade arteries of the world, the 18th century witnessed an unprecedented mobilization of naval power and legal authority, designed to suppress piracy and secure the prosperity of expanding empires. This was no simple task, as pirates had for decades exploited the vastness of the seas, the gaps in law enforcement, and the political rivalries between colonial powers, but gradually, through a combination of evolving maritime law, naval innovation, and international diplomacy, the world's great powers began to forge a global system aimed at bringing the pirates to heel. At the heart of this transformation was the development and enforcement of anti-piracy laws, a complex web of legal codes designed to define piracy clearly, criminalize it across borders, and establish procedures for prosecution and punishment. Pirate acts, robbery, murder, kidnapping at sea were increasingly recognized as crimes against all nations, not just the victims' countries. This principle of universal jurisdiction allowed navies and courts to pursue pirates wherever they were found, cutting off their ability to find safe harbor under any flag. Admiralty courts, often established in colonial ports like Jamaica, Charleston, and Port Royal, held swift trials where pirates faced the gallows if found guilty. These courts operated under maritime law that was increasingly codified and standardized, reflecting the growing international consensus on the need to maintain order on the seas. Simultaneously, naval forces evolved to meet the unique challenges posed by piracy. Fleets became more agile and better coordinated, using faster ships like sloops and schooners capable of chasing down the nimble pirate vessels. Naval officers developed sophisticated patrol routes, intelligence networks, and cooperative strategies to surveil pirate hotspots and intercept pirate fleets before they could strike. The collaboration between empires, while complicated by rivalries, sometimes extended to joint operations and information sharing, an early form of international maritime security cooperation. Naval commanders cultivated relationships with local, colonial governors and merchants, creating a network that blurred the lines between military, legal, and commercial interests in the fight against piracy. One cannot overlook the role of technology and navigation advances during this period. Improved cartography, more accurate chronometers for determining longitude, and advancements in ship design all contributed to the increased effectiveness of anti-piracy campaigns. With better knowledge of ocean currents, winds, and pirate hideouts, naval forces could anticipate pirate movements and strike preemptively. The vast oceans became more knowable, less a realm of mystery and freedom, and more a stage for calculated power. This period also saw the decline of the traditional privateer and a shift toward state-controlled naval warfare. Letters of marque became rare and increasingly restricted as governments sought to monopolize the use of force at sea. The blurry legal space that had allowed many privateers to operate at the edge of legitimacy closed tightly, forcing many former privateers either into legitimate naval service or into outright piracy, the latter path often a desperate gamble. This tightening of maritime law was a crucial step toward the establishment of the modern concepts of international maritime law and the principle of sovereign control over naval force. As the 18th century progressed, the impact of these coordinated, efforts became increasingly clear. Pirate strongholds fell. Pirate crews dwindled. Once thriving pirate enclaves were replaced by colonial administrations and military outposts. Merchants and traders regained confidence, and the flows of goods from sugar, tobacco, and cotton, two precious metals, became more secure. The economic growth of colonial empires depended heavily on this newfound maritime order. Yet the story is not just one of suppression. The anti-piracy campaigns and laws laid important foundations for the modern world's approach to maritime security. Principles established during this era like universal jurisdiction, international naval cooperation, and maritime law continue to underpin efforts today to combat piracy off the Horn of Africa, in Southeast Asia, and beyond. The legacy of those turbulent years endures in the structures that keep the global sea lanes open and safe. As you let your body sink deeper into relaxation, imagine the steady thrum of naval drums, the disciplined clatter of sailors' boots on deck, the flutter of flags signaling orders across the water. Feel the weight of history pressing gently, a reminder of the fragile balance between freedom and order, between chaos and control. The vast ocean, once the playground of pirates and rogues, is now a realm of laws, treaties, and watchful eyes, yet still holds the mysteries of the deep and the echoes of those who dared to defy the tide. Rest now, traveler, cradled by the seas, ancient rhythm, as history's waves carry you toward peaceful sleep. The fight against piracy shaped our world, but the ocean's song remains endless and eternal. As the guns fell silent on the seas and the last pirate strongholds were captured, a new chapter in the story of piracy began, not one of battles and plunder, but of memory, myth, and imagination. The reality of piracy in the 17th and early 18th centuries was harsh, often brutal, and rooted in complex political and economic conditions. Yet, as the decades passed, the stories of pirates transformed in the telling, becoming something far more romantic and enduring. These tales captured the public imagination, inspiring generations with images of daring adventure, rebellion against tyranny, and the freedom of the open sea. The seeds of this transformation were sown even during the golden age of piracy itself. News of pirate exploits spread rapidly through newspapers, pamphlets, and ballads. These accounts, often sensationalized and exaggerated, painted vivid pictures of fearless captains, buried treasure, secret codes, and swashbuckling battles. They fed a growing appetite for tales of the sea among the literate and illiterate alike, bringing the distant and dangerous world of pirates into taverns and drawing rooms across Europe and the colonies. Some of the earliest and most influential works, such as Captain Charles Johnson's 1724 book, A General History of the Robberies and Murders of the Most Notorious Pirates, compiled pirate biographies and stories that blurred the line between fact and fiction, setting the foundation for pirate lore. This book, along with other contemporary and later accounts, introduced us to larger-than-life characters like Blackbeard, Anne Bonny, Calico Jack, and Bartholomew Roberts. Their personalities were often embellished. Blackbeard's fearsome beard lit with slow-burning fuses, Anne Bonny's defiance of gender norms, Calico Jack's flair and style. These portraits, though based on kernels of truth, evolved into archetypes that would define the pirate image for centuries. The pirate became a symbol, not just of criminality, but of resistance, adventure, and freedom. Qualities that resonated strongly in times and places marked by rigid social orders and imperial oppression. As the 18th and 19th centuries progressed, the pirate's image was further romanticized through literature, theater, and later, cinema. The 19th century's fascination with exoticism and adventure found fertile ground in pirate tales. Writers like Robert Louis Stevenson with Treasure Island crafted stories that combined thrilling action with complex moral questions, embedding the pirate firmly in popular culture. The iconic black flag with the skull and crossbones, the Jolly Roger, became a universal symbol of rebellion and danger. Instantly recognizable and endlessly evocative, this romantic image sometimes overshadowed the harsher realities of piracy, the violence, the squalor, the short lives and brutal deaths of many pirates. Yet, it is this very mix of darkness and freedom, lawlessness and loyalty that continues to captivate us. The pirate embodies a paradoxical spirit, at once outlaw and hero, villain and liberator, bound by codes yet living outside the law. This complexity fuels the ongoing fascination, inspiring countless adaptations in books, films, games, and art. Moreover, piracy's legacy extends beyond entertainment. It influenced political thought and social movements by embodying ideas of democracy and resistance to unjust authority. Pirate ships operated with elected captains, shared spoils, and written codes, early forms of collective governance and labor rights that contrasted sharply with the hierarchies of their times. This has led some historians and thinkers to view pirates as proto-democrats, challenging the established order and experimenting with radical social structures at sea. Today, piracy still exists in different forms and regions, from the coasts of Somalia to Southeast Asia. Modern anti-piracy efforts build on centuries of legal and naval tradition, yet the cultural image of pirates remains rooted in the legends of the past. This duality between the reality of maritime crime and the myth of the freewheeling adventurer continues to shape how we understand the sea and those who dare to defy it. As you close your eyes now, imagine the flickering lanterns of a pirate ship's deck, the rustle of sails in the night wind, the whispered tales shared among crew under starlit skies. Feel the echo of their songs, the tension between danger and camaraderie, the promise of freedom carried on the salty breeze. This is the legacy of pirates, not just the facts recorded in history books, but the enduring dream of the open sea, the call to adventure that never truly fades. Rest now, traveler, wrapped in the soft embrace of these stories, as the ocean's timeless song carries you gently into peaceful sleep. The history of pirates is not just past, it lives on in our imagination, in the endless horizon, and in every whispered legend waiting to be discovered. When we think of pirates, the image that often comes to mind is a grizzled man with a weathered face, wielding a cutlass and shouting commands over the crashing waves. Yet, hidden beneath the waves of history is a remarkable and sometimes surprising truth. Women were active participants in piracy, carving out their own places in a dangerous and male-dominated world. These women defied the rigid gender roles of their time, showing extraordinary courage, cunning, and resilience as they sailed the high seas, fought in battles, and even commanded ships. Pirate women did not fit the stereotypical image of 18th century femininity. At a time when women were largely confined to domestic spaces, barred from formal maritime professions, and often subject to strict social codes, these women broke every rule. Some disguised themselves as men to join pirate crews, adopting male names, cutting their hair, and mastering the rough skills of seamanship and combat. Others were already sailors, courted or married to pirates, or captains in their own right, commanding respect and fear in equal measure. One of the most famous female pirates was Anne Bonny, whose story has become emblematic of women who lived the pirate's life, born in Ireland and later moving to the Caribbean, Anne defied her family's expectations and societal norms by embracing the lawless life of piracy. She sailed with the notorious pirate Calico Jack Rackham and fought fiercely alongside him. Anne's reputation was not just built on her defiance of gender roles, but also on her fierce temper, skill with weapons, and unwavering loyalty to her crew. Her story, like many others, was preserved in trial records and popular pamphlets, where she was both feared and sensationalized. Another legendary figure is Mary Read, who also disguised herself as a man to live and fight among pirates. Mary's life was marked by hardship and adventure long before she joined pirate crews. She served in the British military before turning to piracy, and her ability to hold her own in battles challenged not only her enemies but also the assumptions of those around her. When captured, she revealed her true identity, astonishing her captors and defying their expectations of what a pirate could be. These women were not anomalies, but part of a broader phenomenon. Historians now recognize that women played a variety of roles within pirate society: fighters, navigators, strategists, and even leaders. Their presence challenged the conventional ideas about gender and power, showing that piracy, with its often democratic and merit-based structures, could offer opportunities denied elsewhere. On pirate ships, where strength, skill, and loyalty mattered more than birth or gender, some women found a rare chance to assert agency and equality. However, life as a female pirate was perilous. Women had to constantly navigate the dangers of discovery, as revealing their gender could lead to severe punishment or expulsion. They faced discrimination from crewmates and rivals alike, and had to prove themselves continually in a world shaped by violence and mistrust. Yet, many persevered, driven by the same thirst for freedom, wealth, or revenge that motivated their male counterparts. The stories of these women pirates also reveal much about the wider social and economic contexts of the era. Some were escaped slaves or former servants seeking liberation. Others were women cast out by society, who found refuge and purpose among the pirates. Their tales intersect with themes of colonialism, slavery, and resistance, adding layers of complexity to the history of piracy. Moreover, the presence of women in piracy complicates the simplistic portrayal of pirates as solely brutish and barbaric. Their lives show moments of tenderness, solidarity, and even romance amid the chaos. The bonds formed on pirate ships often transcended conventional social divisions, creating unique communities in the midst of lawlessness. As the sun sets on this episode, imagine a pirate ship cutting through moonlit waves, where among the rugged crew stands a woman, her eyes sharp with resolve, her hands steady on the rigging. She defies the expectations of her time, carving her own destiny on the unpredictable sea. Her story, like those of many other women pirates, invites us to rethink the past and embrace its full complexity. Now, as you relax and feel your body sink into calmness, picture the gentle sway of the ship, the salt air on your skin, and the quiet strength of those who dared to live beyond the rules. Let this vision carry you toward rest, wrapped in the wild and enduring spirit of the pirate woman. The stories of individual women pirates bring to life the fierce determination and extraordinary courage required to survive and thrive in the brutal world of piracy. Each woman carved a unique path through danger, betrayal, and conflict, leaving marks on history that ripple far beyond their time. Their tales are not only thrilling adventures, but windows into a hidden history of resilience and rebellion. Take, for example, the saga of Anne Bonny and Mary Read, whose lives are forever intertwined by fate and the chaotic world they inhabited. Anne, born into privilege but restless and rebellious, chose to abandon a conventional life for the uncertain freedom of the pirate's path. When she met Calico Jack Rackham, a pirate captain known for his flamboyant style and cunning, Anne joined his crew. A bold act for any woman, but especially so for one who openly defied the era's gender norms. Not content to merely sail alongside the men, Anne fought alongside them in battles, her ferocity legendary. According to trial transcripts, when faced with the threat of execution, Anne reportedly told the court she was pregnant, a tactic that delayed her fate and demonstrated her cunning under pressure. Mary Read's journey was equally remarkable. Disguised as a man, she served in the British military before joining pirate crews. Her combat skills and ability to maintain her male disguise allowed her to fight and live as one of the crew, blurring gender boundaries in an unforgiving environment. When captured with Anne and Calico Jack's crew, Mary revealed her true identity, surprising and intriguing those around her. Both women's stories challenge the assumption that piracy was an exclusively male domain and reveal how identity, gender, and survival intertwined on the high seas. But women pirates were not limited to these famous figures. There were others, often less documented, but no less daring. Fanny Campbell, a figure from later folklore and possible fact, was said to have disguised herself as a man to seek revenge and find her missing lover, joining pirate ships and fighting bravely. The legend of Qing Shi, a powerful Chinese pirate leader in the early 19th century, stretches the boundaries of what many consider the golden age of piracy, but shows how women took command on a massive scale elsewhere in the world. Qing Shi commanded hundreds of ships and thousands of pirates, creating one of the most successful and disciplined pirate fleets in history. Her leadership was marked by strict codes of conduct and ruthless efficiency, proving that pirate women were not just participants but sometimes rulers of entire maritime realms. The alliances women pirates formed also shaped their fates and those of their crews. Anne Bonny's partnership with Calico Jack was both personal and professional, blending romance with shared ambitions and mutual respect. Mary Read's loyalty to Anne, especially during their imprisonment, highlights the close bonds forged among pirate women in the face of extreme adversity. These relationships underscore how piracy created unique social dynamics where survival often depended on trust and solidarity, sometimes transcending gender and societal norms. Their legacies continue to echo through history and culture. By challenging the strict roles prescribed to women in their time, pirate women pushed the boundaries of what was possible for women more broadly. They demonstrated bravery, leadership, and independence in a world that often denied them these qualities. Their stories, though sometimes obscured by myth or limited records, offer powerful reminders of women's agency and resilience throughout history. In many ways, the tales of women pirates invite us to reconsider broader narratives about gender, power, and rebellion. They show that the pirate life, for all its dangers and lawlessness, could be a space where traditional hierarchies were upended and new forms of identity and community were forged. These women lived on the edge of society, and in doing so, they reshaped it, if only briefly, on their own daring terms. As night deepens around you, imagine the fierce eyes of Anne and Mary, the commanding presence of Qing Shi, and countless unnamed women who braved storms, battles, and betrayals. Feel their strength ripple through time, inspiring courage and freedom. Let their stories mingle with the steady pulse of the ocean, soothing you into rest and reminding you that history's greatest adventures often hide just beneath the surface. Sleep well, traveler, held in the embrace of these fearless spirits, as the sea whispers its endless song of freedom and defiance. The world of piracy was brutal and unforgiving for everyone. But for women who chose or were forced to live as pirates, the dangers and challenges were multiplied many times over. They sailed into a world dominated by men, where suspicion, violence, and strict social conventions threatened to undo them at every turn. Yet, these women navigated this perilous environment with remarkable resilience, adapting in ways both subtle and bold to survive and sometimes even thrive amid the chaos of piracy. One of the most immediate challenges female pirates faced was concealment. Many women disguised themselves as men to avoid detection, adopting male clothing, cutting their hair short, and imitating masculine mannerisms. This disguise was not merely superficial, but required constant vigilance. They had to guard their voices, suppress feminine habits, and live with the ever-present fear of exposure. Discovery could mean brutal punishment, expulsion from the crew, or even death. This constant tension required immense mental and physical stamina. Yet, for many, the disguise was not only a survival tactic but a means to claim a place in a world otherwise barred to them. Living in close quarters with men, often for months or years, posed further difficulties. Pirate ships were crowded, unsanitary, and harsh environments. For a woman, the risk of sexual violence was significant. Some pirate women, like Anne Bonny, were known to have fought fiercely to defend themselves, matching or outmatching men in combat. Others depended on alliances, friendships, or romantic relationships with powerful figures aboard ship for protection. The bonds forged among crew members were crucial, creating a fragile social fabric that balanced suspicion with camaraderie. In some cases, female pirates earned the respect of their crewmates by demonstrating exceptional skill in navigation, combat, or leadership qualities that transcended gender biases. Another challenge was the intersection of gender with legal persecution. When captured, women pirates often faced a different kind of scrutiny. Their gender complicated legal proceedings. In some cases, like Anne Bonny's, claims of pregnancy delayed executions, while in others, revealing their identity could lead to harsher treatment. Courts and the public were fascinated by women pirates, sometimes viewing them as aberrations or moral warnings. Trial records reveal a mix of fear, intrigue, and misogyny, reflecting society's struggle to comprehend women who defied prescribed roles so radically. Despite these obstacles, many women employed tactical intelligence to navigate their precarious positions. Some used disguise not only to blend in but to exploit assumptions about gender to their advantage, concealing their true identity until the moment of combat or negotiation. Others cultivated reputations that commanded respect and deterred challenges. Pirate codes, which emphasized fairness and shared spoils, sometimes protected women from exploitation, fostering an unusual form of egalitarianism at sea. The myths surrounding women pirates often blur the line between fact and fiction, complicating our understanding of their true lives. Popular narratives have sometimes exaggerated or sanitized their stories, focusing on romance, mystery, or sensationalism. For example, the idea of women pirates always disguising themselves as men is partly true but not universal. Some, like Qingxi, openly commanded fleets as women, wielding authority without concealment. Similarly, tales of buried treasure and secret codes, while captivating, often owe more to storytelling traditions than historical evidence. Yet, these myths also serve an important cultural function. They reflect society's fascination with transgression and freedom, projecting desires for escape from rigid norms onto the figure of the pirate woman. Through stories, whether accurate or embellished, women pirates have become symbols of empowerment, rebellion, and complexity. They challenge us to question historical narratives that exclude or diminish women's roles and inspire a richer, more nuanced understanding of the past. The real lives of women pirates, with their blend of hardship, cunning, courage, and vulnerability, offer invaluable insights into the fluidity of identity and power in extreme circumstances. They remind us that history is not a fixed tale but a tapestry woven from countless voices, some loud and clear, others faint and hidden. By bringing these stories to light, we honor the diverse experiences that shaped the pirate world and the seas beyond. As you settle deeper into rest, imagine the sharp eyes and steady hands of those women watching the horizon, gripping the ropes, standing firm in the face of storms both literal and social. Feel the weight of their legacy, a quiet strength carried on the ocean breeze. Let their resilience and daring echo softly in your mind, soothing you into peaceful sleep. The ocean's vast expanse holds many secrets, and among them are the stories of these extraordinary women who dared to live beyond limits, rewriting what was possible on the waves. Sleep now, cradled by their courage and the endless rhythm of the sea. The life of a pirate was not just about daring raids and fierce battles on the open sea. Beneath the thrilling surface lay a complex and often surprisingly organized economic system. To truly understand piracy's place in history, we must look beyond the swords and guns to the treasure chests, the secret dealings, and the networks that sustained the pirate way of life. The economics of piracy reveal a fascinating story of how pirate crews managed their plunder, distributed wealth, and influenced global commerce in ways that reverberated far beyond their time. Pirates were, first and foremost, motivated by profit. Every raid, every captured ship, was a calculated risk taken in hopes of securing valuable goods: gold, silver, spices, textiles, weapons, and other commodities that could be sold or traded. But unlike the stereotypical lone marauder, pirate crews often operated with a surprising degree of order and fairness when it came to dividing spoils. Pirate codes formalized sets of rules agreed upon by crew members laid out the shares of plunder, compensation for injuries, and the penalties for disobedience. These codes helped maintain discipline and loyalty, ensuring that the spoils were divided in ways that balanced risk and reward. Typically, a captain earned a larger share than ordinary crew members, recognizing the leadership and responsibilities of command, but shares were more democratic than on naval or merchant ships of the time, reflecting the pirates' disdain for strict hierarchies and aristocratic privilege. Specialists like carpenters and navigators often received extra shares, acknowledging their critical skills. This system of shared wealth was revolutionary in an age when most laborers faced harsh conditions with little hope of fair compensation. Once plundered goods were secured, pirates faced the challenge of turning their loot into usable wealth. Unlike legitimate merchants, pirates could not openly sell stolen cargo without risking capture or betrayal. Instead, they relied on secret pirate-friendly ports and markets where black market trade thrived. These hidden enclaves, ranging from small Caribbean islands to remote coastal towns, served as hubs where pirates could fence goods, repair ships, and resupply. Local merchants, smugglers, and corrupt officials often collaborated with pirates, blurring the lines between legality and crime in these markets. Exotic goods like sugar, tobacco, rum, and silk changed hands under the radar of colonial powers. Pirates traded with plantation owners, merchants, and even naval officers willing to turn a blind eye or profit from the trade. The underground economy sustained pirate communities and created a shadow network that challenged the monopolies of empires like Spain, England, and France. Piracy's economic impact extended beyond individual wealth and clandestine markets. By disrupting established trade routes, pirates forced colonial powers to divert resources to protect their ships and ports, increasing military expenditures and altering naval strategies. The constant threat of pirate raids made maritime commerce more dangerous and expensive, influencing the development of insurance, convoy systems, and maritime law. Moreover, piracy contributed to the circulation of goods and wealth in regions otherwise marginalized by official trade networks. The flow of goods through pirate channels sometimes benefited local economies, fostering diverse cultural exchanges and hybrid economies that blended indigenous, European, and African influences. In this way, piracy was not merely a destructive force but also a complex participant in the global economic system of the early modern world. The economics of piracy also intersected with broader social issues such as slavery and colonialism. Pirates sometimes freed enslaved people, incorporated them into crews, or raided slave ships, disrupting the brutal transatlantic slave trade. While pirates were not inherently abolitionists, their actions occasionally challenged established systems of exploitation, adding another layer of complexity to their economic role. As night falls and the ocean's darkness deepens, picture a pirate captain carefully dividing gold coins among a crew gathered on deck. The glint of treasure matched by wary eyes and eager hands. Imagine secret markets alive with whispered deals, exotic goods exchanged beneath the cover of night, and ships slipping through hidden coves to escape the watchful eyes of empires. This hidden economy, full of risk and opportunity, sustained the pirate dream of freedom and fortune. Let this vivid scene lull you toward sleep, carried by the gentle rocking of waves and the promise of undiscovered riches in the vast, dark sea. Pirate life was shaped not only by daring exploits and fierce battles, but by a set of unwritten and sometimes written rules that governed behavior, order, and the distribution of wealth among crews. These rules, often referred to as pirate codes or articles, were essential to maintaining discipline, fairness, and cooperation in a society that rejected the hierarchies and strict authority of the established world. Understanding pirate codes offers a remarkable glimpse into how pirates created their own micro-societies, often surprisingly democratic and pragmatic within the lawlessness of the seas. Contrary to popular belief, pirate ships were not anarchic freefalls ruled by the strongest or most ruthless. Instead, many crews operated under agreed-upon articles that set clear expectations for behavior, decision-making, and the sharing of spoils. These codes were drafted, debated, and signed by all crew members, captain included, before setting sail. This collective agreement ensured that everyone had a voice and a stake in the ship's fortunes, creating a fragile but effective form of self-governance. One of the most famous pirate codes comes from Captain Bartholomew Roberts, who codified rules that balanced discipline with fairness. His articles included provisions forbidding theft among crew members, mandating compensation for injuries sustained in battle, and setting curfews and conduct standards. For example, pirates who lost a limb in combat were often awarded additional shares of loot as compensation for their sacrifice, an early form of disability pay. These codes also punished desertion and insubordination, helping to maintain cohesion during long and dangerous voyages. The captain, while respected and often elected by the crew, did not hold absolute power. His authority was balanced by a quartermaster, elected separately, who represented the crew's interests and often oversaw the distribution of loot and the enforcement of rules. This division of power was crucial in preventing tyranny and ensuring that leadership remained accountable. If a captain acted unfairly or recklessly, he could be deposed by the crew. A remarkable level of democratic control rare in contemporary naval or merchant vessels. Decisions about whether to attack a ship, which course to take, or how to divide spoils were often made collectively through votes or council meetings. This participatory process extended even to discipline, where punishments for violations of the code could include fines, marooning, or physical penalties. Such systems fostered a sense of shared responsibility and trust, essential for survival. When faced with enemies and the unpredictability of the sea, social dynamics aboard pirate ships were shaped not only by these codes but by the diverse backgrounds of their crews. Pirates came from many nationalities, ethnicities, and social classes, including escaped slaves, sailors from merchant and naval vessels, and even former soldiers. The pirate ship was often a melting pot where conventional social divisions were blurred. The promise of equal shares of loot and respect for skill offered opportunities for those marginalized elsewhere. This diversity, while a source of strength, also created challenges. Language barriers, cultural differences, and conflicting interests had to be managed carefully. Pirate crews developed informal codes of conduct to handle disputes, build alliances, and maintain morale. Storytelling, song, and shared rituals played important roles in fostering community and loyalty. Despite the camaraderie, life aboard was harsh and dangerous. Pirates faced constant threats from naval forces, rival crews, storms, disease, and scarcity of supplies. Discipline and order, maintained through the pirate code and collective decision-making, were crucial for endurance. The mix of democracy and strict rules created a tense but workable balance, allowing pirate ships to function as both efficient raiding machines and temporary communities. The existence of these codes also challenges the common perception of pirates as mere criminals or outlaws without structure or ethics. Instead, they reveal a complex social experiment, a rejection of rigid hierarchies in favor of negotiated order and shared power. This experiment, while short-lived for most crews, left a lasting impression on maritime culture and inspired later democratic ideas. As darkness deepens and the steady roll of the sea rocks you gently, picture a pirate crew gathered under starlight, voices raised in debate or song, a captain standing humbly among equals. Imagine the careful tallying of shares, the firm but fair enforcement of rules, the laughter and tension of a community forged in the crucible of danger and opportunity. Let this vision of order, amid chaos and freedom within limits, lull you toward restful sleep. The pirate coda, pact of honor among rogues, whispers through the night, a testament to human resilience and the search for justice in the wild frontier of the sea. Pirate life wasn't only about the adrenaline rush of capturing a ship or hoarding treasure. It was equally about the intricate and secretive networks that allowed pirates to convert their stolen goods into usable wealth, sustain their crews, and influence economic systems on a global scale. These trade networks, often hidden from official eyes, were lifelines for pirate operations and key players in the shadow economies of the time. Understanding these systems offers a window into a world where legality blurred, commerce thrived underground, and empires felt the impact of piracy far beyond the docks. Once pirates seized goods, whether gold coins, precious gems, textiles, spices, firearms, or everyday commodities, their challenge was to fence these items without alerting naval forces or colonial authorities. The public markets of major port cities were off-limits, heavily policed, and often closed to suspected pirates. Instead, pirate traders operated through clandestine routes and secret havens where law enforcement was lax. Officials were bribed, or complicity was the norm. The Caribbean basin, with its myriad islands, hidden coves, and thinly governed territories, was the quintessential hub of these shadow economies. Islands like Nassau in the Bahamas became notorious pirate republics, where pirates established quasi-permanent bases with taverns, blacksmiths, shipyards, and markets catering to their needs. In these havens, merchants, smugglers, and corrupt officials formed symbiotic relationships with pirates, profiting from the flow of illicit goods while providing essential services such as repairs, provisions, and money laundering. The process of fencing goods was multifaceted. Precious metals and jewels could be melted down and recast to obscure their origins, then sold through layers of intermediaries. Exotic goods like sugar, tobacco, coffee, and rum, products of plantations and colonies, were often traded openly, despite their questionable provenance. Pirates could exchange these commodities for weapons, fresh food, or information. Sometimes they bartered goods directly with indigenous peoples or less scrupulous merchants, further diversifying trade channels. These black markets were not isolated anomalies, but integral components of broader economic systems. Pirate activities disrupted the tightly controlled mercantile policies of European empires, such as Spain's restrictive trade monopolies. By injecting stolen or smuggled goods into circulation, pirates undercut official merchants, altered prices, and created alternative supply chains. This forced colonial powers to adapt by strengthening naval patrols, establishing convoys, and instituting maritime laws, measures that increased the cost and complexity of global trade. Piracy's economic impact extended beyond immediate losses. It induced shifts in trade routes as merchants sought safer passages, stimulated technological innovation in shipbuilding and navigation to evade pirates, and influenced the political landscape as colonial governments negotiated with pirate leaders or integrated former pirates into their naval forces. Some pirates accepted pardons and turned their skills to privateering or legitimate trade, further entwining piracy with official economic structures. The ripple effects were global. Pirate actions in the Caribbean affected trade flows between Europe, Africa, and the Americas, contributing to the evolving dynamics of the transatlantic economy. Similarly, in the Indian Ocean, pirate fleets preyed on the lucrative spice routes, disrupting commerce between Asia and Europe, and challenging powerful entities like the East India Company. These disruptions occasionally fostered new economic opportunities, as pirate-controlled ports became centers of cultural exchange and economic innovation, blending goods, peoples, and ideas across continents at the same time. Piracy intersected tragically with systems of exploitation, including the transatlantic slave trade. Pirates sometimes attacked slave ships, freeing captives and integrating them into crews, yet also profited from the slave economy by trafficking enslaved people themselves. This duality complicates piracy's economic legacy, revealing both resistance and complicity within brutal colonial frameworks. Imagining this shadow economy at night, Envision secretive exchanges under flickering lanterns. Coded messages passed between ships and shore, and fleets slipping silently through hidden inlets. Picture merchants balancing fear and greed, sailors transforming stolen treasure into survival, and colonial powers scrambling to contain a force that thrived in the margins. As you drift toward sleep, let these images mingle with the ocean's timeless rhythms, the interplay of light and darkness, order and chaos, law and outlawry. The hidden economies of piracy remind us that beneath the surface of history lie worlds shaped by ingenuity, risk, and rebellion, echoing in the waves that cradle you now. The success of pirates throughout history hinged not only on their daring but on the mastery of their weapons, the design and adaptability of their ships, and the cunning tactics they employed during raids and battles. Understanding the instruments of piracy, the swords, pistols, cannons, and vessels, and the strategic thinking behind their use, reveals how pirates carved out a potent presence on the seas despite facing larger and better equipped naval forces. Their innovative approaches to maritime warfare made them legends in their own time and continue to fascinate historians and storytellers alike. Pirates needed weapons that were effective, versatile, and suited to the chaotic environment of naval combat. Close-quarters fighting was the norm aboard ships, where narrow decks and rolling seas required weapons that could be wielded quickly and decisively. Cutlasses were the quintessential pirate weapon, short, curved swords with a broad blade designed for slashing and thrusting in tight spaces. Lightweight and easy to handle, cutlasses allowed pirates to engage enemies swiftly, hacking through rigging or fending off borders. The cutlass's symbolism endures as an icon of piracy, both practical and terrifying. Alongside cutlasses, pirates wielded a variety of firearms, including flintlock pistols and muskets. Flintlock pistols were prized for their portability and stopping power at close range, though their slow reload time meant they were often fired once before hand-to-hand combat ensued. Muskets, with longer barrels and greater range, were useful for volleys during initial engagements, softening enemy defenses before boarding. Pirates often carried multiple pistols to reload quickly, reflecting their understanding of firearm limitations in the heat of battle. Artillery played a crucial role in piracy, with ship-mounted cannons serving as both offensive and defensive weapons. Pirates typically equipped their vessels with a mix of cannons, varying in size and range. Larger cannons could batter enemy hulls from a distance, while smaller swivel guns mounted on rails were used to repel boarders or target crew on enemy decks. These weapons allowed pirates to intimidate and disable merchant ships before closing in for the final attack. The ships themselves were vital to pirate tactics. Unlike heavily armed naval warships, pirate vessels were often smaller, faster, and more maneuverable. Sloops, brigantines, and schooners were favored for their speed and shallow drafts, enabling pirates to navigate coastal waters, escape pursuers, and launch surprise attacks. Some pirate captains modified their ships, stripping unnecessary weight, adding extra sails, or reinforcing hulls to improve performance. Speed and agility were paramount. A pirate ship's ability to outpace larger naval vessels often determined success or failure. Pirates employed tactics that capitalized on their ship's strengths and the element of surprise. They relied on intelligence gathering using spies, informants, and lookouts to identify vulnerable targets and plan attacks. Ambushes from hidden coves, attacks under cover of darkness or fog, and deceptive signals such as flying false flags were common strategies. Pirates also understood psychological warfare, using fear and reputation as weapons. The mere sight of a feared pirate flag, like the infamous Jolly Roger, could induce surrender without a fight, saving lives and preserving ships. During combat, pirates favored boarding tactics, closing in quickly to engage in hand-to-hand fighting where their agility and ferocity gave them an edge. Coordinated attacks involved grappling hooks, ropes, and ladders to storm enemy decks. Discipline and teamwork were essential. Pirate crews drilled in battle formations, weapons handling, and quick responses to enemy maneuvers. The flexibility and innovation of pirate tactics extended beyond battle. Pirates adapted to changing conditions, sometimes abandoning ships to evade capture or employing decoys and false trails. They mastered navigation skills to exploit currents, winds, and coastal geography, using hidden channels and reefs inaccessible to larger ships. This intimate knowledge of the sea was a strategic advantage, turning the ocean itself into a weapon. These weapons, ships, and tactics were not static. They evolved in response to new threats, technologies, and opportunities. As naval powers improved their fleets and defenses, pirates adapted by changing ships, modifying tactics, or shifting operational areas. This constant evolution underscored the pirates' resourcefulness and determination to survive in a world defined by conflict and competition. Imagine, as you rest, the clash of steel in the moonlight, the sharp crack of pistols, and the thunder of cannons echoing across dark waters. Picture swift ships cutting through waves, sails billowing in the night breeze, and crews poised with weapons ready to strike or defend. The blend of skill, daring, and strategy that defined pirate warfare unfolds in your mind's eye. A vivid tableau against the endless rhythm of the sea. Let this vision of pirate mastery, the tools and tactics that made them legends, you into peaceful sleep, where the seas, mysteries, and adventures beckon silently. Pirates, often operating far from the resources of formal navies and armies, relied heavily on personal weapons and protective gear suited to the brutal, close-quarters nature of shipboard combat. Their armaments reflected not only the practical demands of fighting aboard rocking decks but also the resourcefulness required to survive in a hostile and ever-changing environment. From the gleam of a cutlass blade to the sharp point of a boarding dagger, the weapons pirates carried were extensions of their will to dominate, intimidate, and endure. At the heart of every pirate's arsenal was the iconic cutlass. This short, broad, slightly curved sword was ideally suited to the cramped and chaotic environment of a ship's deck. Its design allowed for powerful slashing attacks and quick thrusts, crucial when fighting face-to-face with enemy sailors or boarding rival vessels. Unlike the long, unwieldy rapiers favored on land, the cutlass was a weapon of efficiency and practicality. Some cutlasses were ornately decorated, reflecting a pirate's status or wealth, but most were simple, rugged tools forged for survival and combat. The cutlass became synonymous with piracy, embodying the swashbuckling image of the rogue seafarer. Alongside cutlasses, pirates commonly carried a variety of knives and daggers. Boarding knives, short, sturdy blades, were essential for close combat and utility purposes, like cutting ropes or rigging during battles or escapes. These knives were often concealed, allowing pirates to surprise opponents in the chaos of boarding actions. Some pirates even carried multiple knives, distributing them among crew members to maximize their offensive capabilities. The versatility of these blades made them indispensable companions on the turbulent seas. Firearms added a deadly element to pirate weaponry. Flintlock pistols were the preferred sidearm, Prized for their portability and stopping power at close range, these single-shot pistols required careful maintenance and skill to reload quickly. So many pirates carried 2 or more to fire multiple shots in rapid succession before resorting to swords or knives. The loud report and smoke of a flintlock pistol were also psychological weapons, capable of intimidating enemies even if their practical effect was limited. Muskets and blunderbusses, short-barreled firearms with wide muzzles, were less common but sometimes employed to fire volleys of shot or grape shot at enemy crews, clearing decks before boarding. Due to the weight and cumbersome nature of firearms and ammunition, pirates often had to balance firepower with mobility. This led to creative solutions like bandoliers with loops for cartridges, quick access holsters, and careful storage of gunpowder to prevent accidents. Pirates also learned to maintain and repair their weapons at sea, developing rudimentary gunsmith skills to keep their pistols and muskets in fighting condition despite harsh conditions. Protection in pirate combat was largely improvised and varied widely. Unlike formal soldiers or naval officers equipped with standardized armor, pirates relied on a mix of leather jerkins, heavy clothing, and sometimes salvaged pieces of metal armor. Leather was favored for its flexibility and relative resistance to cuts and slashes, offering a compromise between mobility and defense. Some pirates wore thick coats or padded garments, which could absorb or deflect blows. Helmets were rare but occasionally used by those who could acquire them, providing crucial protection against head injuries during boarding fights. The absence of heavy armor reflected the demands of speed and agility on pirate ships. Wearing cumbersome metal armor would have hampered quick movements, climbing, rigging, and rapid assaults. Instead, pirates prized dexterity and the ability to fight fiercely and fluidly. This emphasis on mobility also meant that discipline and training in hand-to-hand combat were vital, as a moment's hesitation or clumsiness could prove fatal in the melee of battle. Pirates also carried various tools that doubled as weapons or survival gear: hatchets, small axes, and even makeshift clubs crafted from wood or metal scraps. These versatile implements could be wielded in a fight or used to breach doors, cut ropes, or repair ships, underscoring the multifaceted roles pirates played as fighters, sailors, and craftsmen. The personal weapons and armor of pirates were thus not just instruments of violence but symbols of identity and adaptation. Each piece told a story of necessity, ingenuity, and the harsh realities of life at sea. These tools reflected the pirates' defiance of conventional norms, their embrace of freedom tempered by the constant presence of danger. As you relax and let your breathing slow, imagine a pirate preparing for battle under a star-streaked sky. Feel the weight of a cutlass in hand, the cold metal of a flintlock pistol pressed against the hip, and the rough leather of a worn jerkin shielding the body. Hear the clatter of weapons being readied, the whispered prayers, and the fierce determination that steels a crew facing overwhelming odds. Let the image of these weapons, their gleam, their promise, their history fade softly into the darkness as you drift towards sleep. In the quiet calm, the echoes of pirate bravery and survival whisper on the sea breeze, carrying you gently into dreams where adventure awaits. Pirate naval tactics were a blend of bold innovation, ruthless practicality, and deep understanding of the sea's ever-changing conditions. Unlike the rigid formations and protocols of official navies, pirates embraced flexibility, speed, and surprise, often turning their relatively smaller and less heavily armed ships into deadly instruments of asymmetrical warfare. These tactics were shaped by necessity. Pirates rarely had the resources to engage in protracted artillery duels and instead relied on rapid assaults, deception, and psychological warfare to overwhelm opponents. Central to pirate tactics was the exploitation of speed and maneuverability. Pirate ships, typically smaller than naval warships, were chosen and modified for their ability to sail swiftly and navigate shallow coastal waters inaccessible to larger vessels. This allowed pirates to choose the timing and location of engagements carefully. By using favorable winds, tides, and knowledge of hidden channels, pirates could approach targets silently, outflank pursuers, or escape traps. The emphasis on speed was both offensive and defensive, a way to initiate combat on their own terms or avoid it entirely when odds were unfavorable. One of the most important tactics was the use of surprise and deception. Pirates were masters of disguise, often flying false flags, sometimes those of friendly or neutral nations, to approach unsuspecting merchant vessels. They might also lower their sails to drift silently in the dark or use captured ships to infiltrate ports and gather intelligence. The sudden raising of the infamous Jolly Roger flag was a psychological tactic intended to induce terror and prompt quick surrender. By projecting a fearsome reputation, pirates minimized the need for bloody combat, preserving men and ships. When it came to battle formations, pirates rarely fought in the tight, line-ahead formations typical of formal navies. Instead, they favored looser, more dynamic arrangements that allowed individual ships to maneuver independently while supporting one another. Coordinated attacks involved flanking maneuvers, pincer movements, or dividing enemy forces to isolate and overwhelm individual ships. Communication was often conducted through signal flags, lanterns, or even shouted orders, requiring skillful leadership and disciplined crews to execute complex plans on the chaotic seas. The heart of pirate naval tactics was boarding, closing the distance to enemy ships to engage in fierce hand-to-hand combat. Pirates equipped their ships with grappling hooks, ropes, and boarding planks designed for swift and forceful assaults. Boarding was a high-risk, high-reward strategy. Once pirates gained the deck, their superior close-quarters fighting skills often gave them the advantage. To prepare for boarding, pirates would use their cannons and small arms to weaken enemy crews, targeting rigging to disable maneuverability or firing canister and grapeshot to clear decks. Coordinated volleys of muskets and pistols created chaos, softening defenses before the physical storming of the vessel. Pirate captains placed great emphasis on training crews in these boarding techniques. Drills included rapid deployment of grappling hooks, synchronized attacks up gangways, and quick organization of men to secure critical areas such as the helm and gun decks. Discipline and morale were essential. Panic or confusion could spell disaster. The boarding phase often determined the outcome of an engagement, turning the battle into a brutal melee of swords, knives, and pistols amid splintered wood, and shouting. Evasion was another critical component of pirate strategy. When faced with superior naval forces, pirates relied on their intimate knowledge of local waters, reefs, shoals, and hidden covers to evade capture. They could navigate through narrow channels, too shallow for larger warships, disappearing into labyrinthine archipelagos or islands. Pirates also used tactics such as scattering into smaller groups, confusing pursuers, or setting false trails. This cat-and-mouse game demanded sharp seamanship and constant vigilance. Pirates sometimes employed feigned retreats or baited naval forces into ambushes. A pirate ship might simulate weakness or damage to lure an enemy into a vulnerable position. before turning suddenly to strike with full force. These tactics showcased the pirates' cunning and willingness to use deception as a weapon equal to swords or cannons. Coordination between multiple pirate vessels amplified their power. Pirate fleets could concentrate firepower and manpower to overwhelm heavily armed convoys or naval patrols. Within these flotillas, each captain maintained autonomy but cooperated for mutual benefit. Joint operations allowed pirates to control larger sea areas, protect each other's retreats, and share intelligence. This cooperative strategy transformed pirates from isolated raiders into an organized maritime threat capable of challenging empires. Pirate naval tactics also evolved in response to changing circumstances, as colonial navies increased patrols and deployed faster ships. Pirates adapted by shifting operational theaters, modifying ships for speed, or innovating new tactics. The continual evolution of their approach highlights the pirates' resilience and ingenuity, traits that made them enduring figures in maritime history. As you settle deeper into calmness, envision the thunder of cannons crashing over rolling waves, the sharp clang of cutlasses ringing under moonlight, and the swift darting of pirate ships cutting through shadowed waters. Picture the cunning maneuvers, the silent signals, and the fierce determination etched into every mover dance of danger and daring, played out beneath the endless sky. Let this vision of pirate naval tactics, the strategy and skill behind their ferocity lull you gently into sleep. In the quiet night, the ocean's vast mystery whispers, carrying the echoes of legends across time. Throughout history, the allure of pirates has been shaped as much by the vivid personalities behind the sails as by the myths that surround them. These figures were not merely violent outlaws, but often men and women caught in the tides of empire, war, and social upheaval, driven by ambition, desperation, or a fierce desire for freedom. To understand the real stories behind piracy, we must look beyond the Hollywood caricatures and into the lives of those who carved their names into the rough, salt-stained pages of maritime history. One of the most infamous figures in pirate lore is Edward Teach, better known as Blackbeard. Born around 1680, possibly in Bristol, England, Blackbeard's early life remains shrouded in mystery. But his emergence as a pirate captain during the early 18th century marked the height of the golden age of piracy. Blackbeard was a former privateer during the War of Spanish Succession, a conflict that left many sailors unemployed and pushed them toward piracy. By 1716, he had commandeered his own ship, the Queen Anne's Revenge, a heavily armed frigate that boasted an intimidating arsenal, more cannons than many naval ships at the time. Blackbeard's notoriety stemmed as much from his strategic brilliance as his theatrical intimidation tactics. He cultivated a terrifying image by braiding slow-burning fuses into his beard and lighting them during battle, enveloping his face in smoke and fire, a living embodiment of chaos meant to terrify foes before the first shot was fired. His reputation was a weapon itself. Many merchant captains surrendered at the sight of his ship, or even rumors of his presence, seeking to avoid the brutal combat he was known for. Yet beneath the fierce exterior was a shrewd negotiator. Blackbeard preferred to coerce surrenders through fear and negotiation rather than needless slaughter, understanding that ships were more valuable intact. His blockade of Charleston Harbor in 1718 demonstrated both his power and cunning, where he held the city hostage until his demands for medical supplies were met. However, Blackbeard's reign was short-lived. The Royal Navy, eager to restore order to the Caribbean, sent Lieutenant Robert Maynard to capture him. Their brutal encounter off Ocracoke Island ended with Blackbeard's death after a fierce and bloody fight. But his legend only grew after his demise, symbolizing the terrifying and romantic image of the pirate in popular imagination. Equally compelling is the story of Anne Bonny, a rare example of a woman who not only sailed with pirates but thrived in their violent, male-dominated world. Born around 1700 in Ireland to a wealthy family, Anne's early life was marked by rebellion. She moved to the Americas and married a small-time sailor, but soon abandoned a conventional life to join the crew of the infamous pirate Calico, Jack Rackham. Disguised as a man, Anne fought alongside Rackham's crew with fearless ferocity, often described as having a fiery temper matching her courage. Anne's presence challenged the era's strict gender roles. Alongside her close companion and fellow female pirate, Mary Read, she took part in several shipboard battles, showing proficiency in swordsmanship and combat that earned the respect and fear of her crewmates and enemies alike. When their ship was finally captured by a British naval vessel, Anne, pregnant at the time, avoided execution. But her fate thereafter is uncertain, lost to the tides of history. Anne Bonny's story reveals the complicated intersection of gender, power, and survival in the pirate world, a testament to how piracy sometimes offered women a rare path to autonomy and adventure. Another towering figure in pirate history was Henry Morgan, whose life blurred the line between pirate and privateer. Born in Wales around 1635, Morgan became a licensed privateer, a state-sanctioned corsair commissioned by the English government to attack Spanish ships and settlements in the Caribbean during a time of intense imperial rivalry. Unlike outlaws, privateers operated under letters of marque, allowing them to legally plunder enemy assets. Morgan's raids were among the most daring and successful, including the infamous 1671 sack of Panama City, which was then one of Spain's richest possessions. Morgan's exploits showcased a blend of military strategy and brutal efficiency. He combined amphibious assaults with naval blockades, coordinated land and sea attacks, and used intelligence gathered from informants and local allies. His success brought immense wealth, which he shared generously with his men, bolstering morale and loyalty. Eventually knighted and appointed lieutenant governor of Jamaica, Morgan's life illustrates how piracy and colonial power could be intertwined, with former pirates becoming part of the establishment they once opposed. These three figures represent just a fraction of the complex world of piracy, where motives ranged from greed and vengeance to escape and idealism. Many pirates came from impoverished or marginalized backgrounds: former sailors, indentured servants, escaped slaves seeking a new social order aboard ship where democratic principles and shared spoils replaced rigid class hierarchies on land. Pirate ships often had codes of conduct, including rules for discipline, division of loot, and compensation for injuries, reflecting a surprisingly progressive approach to governance amid lawlessness. As you rest your mind, imagine the tumultuous lives of these pirates, the harsh seas they braved, the storms weathered both literal and political, the fierce battles and fleeting moments of camaraderie. Picture Blackbeard's blazing visage in the smoky night, Anne Bonny standing resolute amid chaos, and Henry Morgan's calculated raids reshaping empires. Their stories are carved into the deep currents of history, echoing through the ages to inspire tales of rebellion, adventure, and freedom. While the popular image of pirates often centers on violent battles and daring plunders, the reality of life aboard pirate ships was complex, demanding, and surprisingly structured. Pirates were not just lawless marauders. They operated under a distinctive social order, with rules and customs developed out of necessity to maintain discipline, fairness, and survival in a harsh, unpredictable world. Understanding this social fabric sheds light on how pirates managed to function effectively as crews and, at times, even form early experiments in democratic governance far ahead of their time. Aboard pirate ships, life was governed by a set of agreed-upon rules often referred to as the Pirate Code or Articles. These codes varied from crew to crew but generally laid out clear expectations for behavior, the division of loot, compensation for injuries, and the consequences of infractions. Unlike the strict hierarchies of naval vessels, pirate crews operated with a notable degree of equality. Captains were powerful but could be deposed by their crews if they failed in leadership. Decisions about major actions were often put to a vote, giving sailors an uncommon voice in their own fate. One of the most revolutionary aspects of pirate life was the division of plunder. Rather than a captain or officers taking the lion's share, the loot was divided into shares distributed according to rank and contribution. The captain might receive 2 or 3 shares, while common sailors received 1. Specialists, like the ship's carpenter or gunner, might receive additional shares as compensation for their vital skills. This equitable sharing was a powerful motivator, fostering loyalty and reducing conflicts born from greed and favoritism. Discipline aboard pirate ships was strict but pragmatic. Violations such as theft from the crew, cowardice in battle, or breaking the articles could result in severe punishment, including marooning, whipping, or execution. Yet pirates also showed surprising leniency compared to naval ships, especially toward offenses that did not threaten the group's survival or safety. Fair trials and collective judgment were often part of the process, emphasizing order over arbitrary cruelty. Pirate ships were microcosms of society, with distinct roles and a division of labor essential for survival. Beyond the captain and quartermaster, who acted as the second-in-command and steward of provisions and discipline, crews included navigators, carpenters, surgeons, cooks, and gunners. Each had responsibilities critical to the ship's functioning, and their expertise was respected. The quartermaster, in particular, held considerable power, balancing the captain's authority and representing the crew's interests, especially during the division of loot or disputes. Social life on board was a blend of camaraderie and tension. Long voyages meant sailors spent months or even years living in cramped, often squalid conditions. Pirates relied on storytelling, music, and drinking to pass time and build bonds. Taverns and ports served as vital social hubs where pirates exchanged news, recruited new members, and resupplied. Despite the brutal reputation of pirates, many sought moments of joy and solidarity, creating a culture that valued brotherhood and shared hardship. Health and hygiene were constant challenges. Injuries from battle, scurvy from vitamin deficiency, and diseases were common threats. Ships often carried surgeons, though their skills were limited by the era's medical knowledge. Care for the sick and wounded was pragmatic. Men incapacitated for long periods were often left behind or transferred to shore. Still, pirates sometimes showed compassion uncommon among sailors, providing compensation for injuries sustained in service. Pirate crews were remarkably diverse, including men of different nationalities, ethnicities, and backgrounds. Many were former slaves or escaped convicts seeking freedom and opportunity. This diversity could lead to tensions, but also fostered a culture of meritocracy where skill and loyalty mattered more than birth or race. Pirates' relatively inclusive society contrasted sharply with the rigid class and racial hierarchies of the colonial world, religion, aboard pirate ships was often pragmatic and fluid. While many pirates came from Christian backgrounds, strict religious observance was rare. Some pirates invoked divine protection or cursed their enemies in colorful oaths. But they were equally likely to mock religious authorities who condemned them. This ambivalence reflected their rejection of mainstream society's rules and their own precarious existence outside the law. At the heart of pirate society was the pursuit of freedom from oppressive navies, harsh labor, and social constraints. Pirate ships offered a form of alternative community where men and women could exercise agency, share wealth more fairly, and live by their own rules. However dangerous and short-lived that existence might be, this fleeting autonomy made piracy not just a criminal enterprise but a profound challenge to the social and political orders of their time. As you relax, imagine yourself aboard a pirate ship under a vast night sky, the sound of waves gently rocking the wooden hull. Feel the camaraderie of the crew gathered around a lantern, sharing stories and laughter, while the captain and quartermaster discuss plans for the next voyage. Hear the creak of the rigging, the murmur of quiet conversations, and the distant call of seabirds. This glimpse into the social heartbeat of pirate life invites you to drift peacefully into dreams of adventure, brotherhood, and the endless ocean. As the sun began to set on the golden age of piracy, the twilight of its most notorious figures unfolded not in storms of glory, but in slow collapses, bitter captures, and, in some cases, quiet disappearances. Their downfall was as varied and dramatic as their lives. Each pirate navigating the final act of rebellion against growing imperial might and tightening maritime law. The world was changing, and for most of them, the gallows awaited. Take Blackbeard, the terror of the American coast. His reputation was so fearsome that merchants abandoned their cargo without a shot fired. But in 1718, the Crown had had enough. The governor of Virginia, fed up with Blackbeard's disruption of trade, dispatched Royal Navy forces under Lieutenant Robert Maynard. What followed was not a quick defeat, but a brutal, hand-to-hand fight off Ocracoke Island in North Carolina's Outer Banks. Blackbeard reportedly sustained over 20 wounds, 5 by gunshot, the rest by blade before collapsing. His decapitated head was hung from the bowsprit of Maynard's ship as a grim warning. Yet, despite his violent end, Blackbeard's name became immortal, spoken in fearful reverence by sailors long after he died, and reimagined by authors, illustrators, and filmmakers centuries later. Then there were Anne Bonny and Mary Read, whose fates were uniquely wrapped in mystery and myth. Captured in 1720 after Calico Jack Rackham's crew was overpowered, the two women who had disguised themselves as men and fought fiercely were imprisoned in Jamaica. Their defense shocked colonial authorities. Both claimed to be pregnant, a plea that postponed execution. Mary Read died in prison, likely of fever or childbirth, but Anne Bonny simply vanished. No official record of her death exists. Some speculate she escaped, aided by a wealthy father or sympathetic jailer. Others believe she was quietly released, remarried, and lived out her days in obscurity. Her disappearance only added to her legend, her fiery defiance, her refusal to conform to gender roles, and her vanishing acts, cementing her place in pirate lore. Calico Jack Rackham, by contrast, met a more straightforward end. Captured alongside Bonny and Red, he was swiftly tried and hanged. His execution marked more than just the loss of a captain. It was symbolic of a broader crackdown on the pirate republics and rogue crews that had once ruled the Caribbean. Not all pirates died violently. Henry Morgan, the Welsh privateer who once led thousands in the sack of Panama, found redemption or, at least, respectability. After years of bloody campaigns, he retired wealthy and was knighted by King Charles II. He became Lieutenant Governor of Jamaica and spent his later years drinking and overseeing the very colony he once defended through bloodshed. His journey from outlaw to official embodied the complex relationship between piracy and empire. Pirates were condemned when they threatened commerce, but tolerated or even rewarded when they served imperial goals. Other pirates were not so fortunate. Bartholomew Roberts, perhaps the most successful pirate in terms of ships captured, was finally brought down in 1722 by HMS Swallow off the coast of West Africa. Roberts had taken over 400 vessels in his career and was known for enforcing strict discipline aboard his ships. He was killed by grapeshot in the final battle, his body reportedly thrown overboard per his own wishes to avoid posthumous humiliation. With Roberts' death, the era of Hayes's piracy entered its final spiral. The Royal Navy and colonial powers had grown too powerful, too well organized. The pirate hunters were now armed with faster ships, better weapons, and the backing of laws passed specifically to stamp out seaborne rebellion. These laws, such as the Piracy Act of 1698 in Britain, allowed for pirates to be tried and executed swiftly, often without even being brought back to London. Judges were sent to colonial courts. Mass hangings followed. At Execution Dock in London and in the colony's Port Royal, Boston, Charleston bodies of pirates swung in the wind for days. Their corpses were sometimes dipped in tar and hung in iron cages, a practice called gibbeting, meant to serve as a haunting deterrent. Yet, even as the nooses tightened, the stories did not die. The last major figures of piracy passed into legend. Ballads were sung about them in taverns from Liverpool to Nassau. Pamphlets and true histories sold in Europe blurred fact and fiction, transforming them into anti-heroes. Over time, their images softened from bloodthirsty killers to rugged individualists, rebels, adventurers. Their flags, the Jolly Roger, once symbols of death, became emblems of freedom. Why did their legends endure, even as the reality was so grim? Perhaps because pirates represented something that common people longed for: defiance in the face of authority, equality in an age of hierarchy, and the possibility of escape from a life defined by hardship. Their deaths marked not only the end of an era of crime, but the end of a brief, chaotic experiment in liberty afloat. So now, as you let your breath slow and your thoughts drift, imagine these final moments, the quiet before the battle, the gallows under a grey sky, the last toast shared on a creaking deck. Picture the ocean, vast and indifferent, swallowing the names and bodies of those who tried to defy its rules. But their stories remain, drifting like ghost ships across time. Rest now, carried on a calm tide. The storm has passed. The sails are furled. The cannon fire has faded into the distant fog. Sleep gently and dream of old ships and timeless seas. Centuries after the hangings ended and the ships rotted away, pirates live on, perhaps more vividly than ever. Their skull and crossbones flags fly in dorm rooms and sports arenas. Their voices echo in Halloween costumes and Disneyland rides. They appear in children's books, video games, and blockbuster films, often stripped of their brutality and painted with a broad brush of adventure, humor, and rebellion. But how did pirates once, seen as murderers, thieves, and threats to civilization, become pop culture icons? The answer lies in how their stories were told and retold, reshaped by changing times, audiences, and needs. It began even during their own era, in the early 18th century. Pamphlets and books were published in Britain and colonial America, promising true accounts of pirate lives. The most famous was Captain Charles Johnson's A General History of the Pirates, first printed in 1724. Though historians still debate Johnson's identities, some believe he was actually Daniel Defoe, the author of Robinson Crusoe. His influence is indisputable. Johnson didn't merely document pirate lives, he dramatized them. He presented Blackbeard and Bonnie, Calico Jack, and dozens of others with flair and moral commentary, creating vivid portraits that blended fact with fiction. His pirates were villains, yes, but also complex, fascinating figures, charismatic, clever, sometimes noble. This book would set the tone for centuries of pirate mythology. In the 19th century, during the Romantic era, pirates were reimagined, once again not as real-world criminals, but as tragic poets and novelists saw in them symbols of individual freedom, of doomed rebellion against unjust societies. The pirate became a Byronic figure, tortured, stylish, possibly noble, but ultimately doomed. Literature, like The Corsair by Lord Byron, or Pirate by Sir Walter Scott, gave readers melancholy swashbucklers who loved the sea and defied the crown with passion. As empires expanded and industrialization tightened its grip on daily life, the pirate offered a fantasy of escape. Then came Robert Louis Stevenson's Treasure Island in 1883. More than any book before or since, it crystallized the modern image of the pirate. Stevenson's Long John Silver was cunning, eloquent, dangerous, but charming. He introduced tropes now inseparable from pirate lore: the talking parrot, the buried treasure map marked with an X, the wooden leg and eye patch, and the seaside tavern filled with secret plots. Treasure Island was wildly successful, and in its wake, the line between history and invention was largely erased. Pirates had become adventure story staples, colorful, dramatic, and removed from their bloody realities. By the 20th century, Hollywood took over the myth-making. Douglas Fairbanks in the silent film The Black Pirate, 1926, and later Errol Flynn in Captain Blood, 1935, cemented the swashbuckling archetype: athletic, heroic, sword-wielding rebels in billowing shirts. These pirates were lovers of justice, not looters. They fought evil governors, rescued damsels, and battled with flair. Their ships were polished, their causes noble, and their enemies often worse than themselves. As the decades rolled on, this version of piracy was amplified, especially in family entertainment. Think of Disney's Pirates of the Caribbean ride, 1967, with its singing animatronic rogues. Or the Pirates of the Caribbean film series, launched in 2003, which transformed Jack Sparrow, a character based partly on Keith Richards, into a global phenomenon. These pirates weren't just rogues, they were pop stars. Their world was dangerous but whimsical, full of magic, curses, and cheeky humor, but not all portrayals have been so light-hearted. In the late 20th and early 21st centuries, films, books, and even academic works began revisiting pirates with more nuance. Historians examined pirate codes, social structures, and the roles of marginalized groups, showing pirates as not just criminals, but as people reacting to oppressive systems, economic exclusion, and imperial war. Works like Marcus Redick, Villains of All Nations, highlighted how pirate ships sometimes offered radical alternatives: floating democracies, racial integration, and worker-led governance. In this view, piracy becomes not a fantasy, but a form of resistance. Meanwhile, modern piracy, especially off the coasts of Somalia or Southeast Asia, has reintroduced a darker, more desperate version of the pirate. These are not swashbucklers but armed raiders driven by poverty, instability, and global inequality. Their appearance on the world stage forces a reckoning with the romantic myths. What does it mean to celebrate pirates while ignoring their real-world consequences? And yet, the appeal of piracy endures. Perhaps it always will. Pirates offer something few historical figures can: the thrill of defiance, the lure of adventure, and the fantasy of freedom at sea. They are both warnings and wishes, ghosts of a time when men and women, however flawed, dared to make their own law beyond the edge of empire tonight. As your thoughts begin to drift and the world quiets, imagine a ship silhouetted against the moon, its sails full, its lanterns glowing dimly. On deck, the voices of the past murmur, the clash of cutlasses, the laughter around a stolen barrel of rum, the whisper of waves carrying dreams of liberty and escape. Let those voices carry you gently towards sleep as we prepare to close this voyage with the final 2 parts of our journey. As the image of the pirate has evolved from blood-soaked criminal to mischievous anti-hero, a quieter but profound transformation has taken place not on the high seas, but in the halls of academia, in art studios, and in protest movements. In the last several decades, scholars, educators, and cultural critics have returned to the history of piracy not to glamorize it, but to understand what it reveals about power, oppression, and the yearning for liberation. For historians, the early 18th century pirate has become a mirror reflecting back the brutal realities of the Atlantic world. This was an age of empire and slavery, where vast fortunes were extracted from colonized lands, and merchant ships carried not only goods, but enslaved people, convicts, and conscripted sailors. Against this backdrop, pirates were more than criminals. They were often former sailors driven to mutiny by starvation, abuse, and betrayal. They were enslaved Africans who escaped bondage and found refuge aboard pirate ships. They were women who broke gender laws, and indigenous people who resisted colonization. In this view, piracy becomes not merely an outlaw's path, but a symptom of global injustice. Books like Marcus Rediker's Between the Devil and the Deep Blue Sea and Villains of All Nations argue that pirate ships sometimes acted as floating, democratized spaces of radical equality in a world defined by brutal hierarchies. On pirate ships, captains were elected. Decisions were made by vote. Loot was shared based on labor, not lineage. Even health care, rudimentary though it was guaranteed for injured crew members, something rare even in state navies. It wasn't utopia, but it was different. It challenged the status quo. It scared the ruling class. Rediker and others describe piracy as part of a hydra of resistance, a many-headed movement that included slaves, sailors, escaped convicts, and other marginalized people, all rebelling, sometimes silently, sometimes violently, against the machinery of empire. And like a hydra, each time one pirate crew was crushed, others sprang up elsewhere. Visual artists, too, have reclaimed pirate imagery for political and social commentary. In street art and protest banners, the Jolly Roger is sometimes used not to glorify violence, but to symbolize resistance to economic inequality, corporate power, or surveillance. The skull and crossed swords, stripped of Disney gloss, become a challenge to authority, warning that freedom is worth fighting for, even at great cost. In queer and feminist circles, pirates have become icons of defiance against gender norms. Anne Bonny and Mary Read, for example, are often celebrated not only for their violence, but for their refusal to live by the expectations of their time. They cross-dressed, They fought, they loved who they wished, and they dared to live on their own terms. Their legacy resonates today in queer communities as symbols of courage and nonconformity. Meanwhile, modern activists have even drawn inspiration from pirates in digital spaces. The term pirate has been adopted by internet freedom advocates and file-sharing groups, who argue that access to information should not be limited by corporate copyright law. Groups like the Pirate Party in Europe use the language and symbolism of seaborne rebellion to argue for transparency, digital rights, and open governance. While their tactics are peaceful, their identity taps into the enduring idea of the pirate as one who breaks unjust rules to create something freer. But not all reimaginings are celebratory. Museums and educators increasingly work to dismantle the romanticism of piracy by showing its connections to human suffering, especially in the Atlantic slave trade. Pirate ships occasionally attacked slavers, but many pirates also traded in enslaved people themselves or raided African settlements. This truth sits uneasily beside the tales of adventure. It complicates the narrative, but it also deepens it. It forces us to confront how rebellion and exploitation can coexist, how liberty for some has too often meant oppression for others. This tension between freedom and brutality, myth and factors, what keeps the pirate story alive. They were heroes to some, horrors to others. They created short-lived islands of autonomy in a sea of violence, but they also engaged in theft, coercion, and bloodshed. Their legacies are both inspiring and uncomfortable, echoing the human tendency to resist and to harm, to build and to destroy. As you lie back and let your mind settle, picture the last fading colors of twilight on a restless ocean. Ships come and go. Some fly black flags, others white sails. In the quiet, you hear voices not shouting, not laughing, but whispering across time. The voices of rebels, of dreamers, of ordinary people who dared to live outside the lines drawn by kings. They made mistakes. They took risks. They lived briefly, but boldly. Let the tide carry those whispers to you, soft and rhythmic. You are not alone on this voyage. Millions have dreamed of freedom before you. Sleep comes like a calm wind now, steady and sure, and soon we'll drift gently into the final part of this journey together. It is night now, and the sea is calm. The wind has died down, and the sails hang loose quiet like curtains in a sleeping room. The last embers in the lanterns glow orange, rocking gently with the motion of the tide. Overhead, the stars glimmer, cold and brilliant, scattered across a sky so wide and so dark it swallows thought itself. The ocean stretches endlessly in every direction, deep and unknowable, like time itself. The stories have all been told. Blackbeard's final roar, and Bonnie's vanishing act, Bartholomew Roberts' code of order on a lawless sea. You've walked the decks of ships long gone. You've stood beside rebels who lived fast, who fought against kings and laws and fate itself. And now you've come to the edge of the map, the place where all pirate stories end. The ink fades, and there are no more dragons to draw, only silence. But listen closely. The silence is not empty. You might hear the creak of an old hull settling into calm water. You might hear the faint murmur of a long-forgotten song sung under starlight in some remote cove. You might hear a whisper, not of ghosts, but of lives lived beyond the reach of rulebooks, people who made mistakes, took risks, and sometimes found freedom, even if only for a moment. These weren't gods or devils. They were human, fierce, flawed, stubbornly alive. And in that humanness, there is something deeply familiar. Pirates were storytellers too. Around barrels of rum or under the crack of thunder, they told stories to explain who they were, to remember who they'd lost, or just to keep fear at bay. Just like now, we tell stories to soothe ourselves before sleep. You're safe here. Let yourself drift. The past is no longer chasing you. The sea is no longer storming. The flags have been lowered, the cannons covered. The gold, whether real or imagined, has lost its gleam. And what's left is still beautiful. The gentle sway of a ship at anchor, the sigh of the waves against the hull, the stars overhead watching in silence. And maybe, if you close your eyes, you can imagine you're there, not as a pirate, not as a sailor, just as someone who has traveled far and is finally at rest. Let the history go quiet now. Let the ocean cradle your thoughts. Let your breathing slow, like the rocking of a gentle tide. There's nothing left to chase, no sails left to raise, only peace, vast and still and timeless. Tonight, you sleep beneath the stars of a sea that no longer exists, but whose stories live on, safe in your memory. You are at the edge of the map now, but the journey is complete. Good night, traveler of forgotten oceans. Rest well.